Finding my strength. Standing alone in my kitchen at 9 months pregnant, I methodically chopped vegetables for dinner while my other hand rested on my growing belly. The steady rhythm of the knife against the cutting board matched the ticking of our wall clock. A constant reminder that David would be home soon, expecting his dinner to be ready. My name is Lisa, and this was my first pregnancy. While filled with the natural anxiety of a first-time mother, I felt truly blessed about welcoming our new family member. However, my husband David's behavior had been making this experience far more challenging than it needed to be. David worked as a white-collar professional with weekends off, but he rarely offered support around the house or helped with shopping. Instead, he spent almost every weekend at his parents' home nearby, maintaining what he called a deep bond with them, though there was never any specific reason for these constant visits. Since becoming pregnant, I've been especially careful about lifting heavy objects. When buying necessities like rice, understanding friends often helped out. My daily routine had become a well-rehearsed performance, waking up early to prepare David's breakfast, seeing him off to work, then tackling the cleaning and laundry before heading out for any necessary shopping. Only after completing dinner preparations could I finally find some time for myself. After taking maternity leave, I discovered a new passion in blogging. Each day, I would write entries accompanied by photos. Meals I prepared, the blue sky overhead, flowers blooming in our garden. Friends and acquaintances often left encouraging comments, and these moments of connection have become small daily joys in my increasingly isolated life. One evening, as I prepared dinner, I heard David return home. He carelessly dropped his bag and jacket on the sofa, and I quietly tidied them away, hanging them properly. "Welcome back," I said softly. "I made hamburgers for dinner." "I'm going to take a bath," he responded curtly, heading straight for the bathroom. 3 years of marriage had taught me not to expect much kindness or consideration from him anymore. Sometimes I wondered if this was truly what a marriage should feel like, but I'd learned to resign myself to it. When David returned in his pajamas, I handed him a drink. His immediate response was, "Where's the beer?" "Sorry, I forgot to buy it today. I'll get some tomorrow." His demeanor changed instantly, anger evident in his voice. "Seriously? Go to the convenience store now." The request irritated me. If you want it so badly, why don't you go get it yourself? It's hard for me to move around with this big belly. His anger escalated, and he started shouting. "You're the one who forgot to buy it. It's your job to fix that mistake. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you get special treatment. My mother always said it's important to keep moving for the sake of health." Knowing that he wouldn't calm down easily when angry, I reluctantly decided to go to the convenience store. Upon arriving, I encountered Sarah, a neighbor who often brightened my days with her cheerful presence. "Oh, Sarah, good evening," I greeted her, trying to mask my distress. "Good evening, Lisa. Did you forget something too?" "I ran out of sauce," she replied with her characteristic warmth. "My husband really wanted beer, and he told me to buy it," I explained, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Why didn't he just go himself?" Sarah's question echoed my own thoughts exactly. "That's what I said, but it didn't get through to him." Sarah's expression softened with concern. "You're having a tough time, aren't you, Lisa?" After walking together for a bit, we parted ways at a crossroad. When I returned home, David was lounging on the sofa watching TV, having made no effort to clean up after dinner. "Why did it take you so long? What were you dawdling around for?" "Give me the beer," he demanded, his voice thick with irritation. I handed him the beer without a word and began cleaning up after the meal, my heart aching from his insensitive remarks. I wanted to retort, to defend myself, but the thought of another shouting match kept me silent. The next morning, David acted as if nothing had happened. He seemed to be the type who forgot everything after a good night's sleep. But I couldn't forget his words from the previous night, and I consciously ignored him. "Why are you making that face so early in the morning? Don't take it out on me," he complained. "I'm heading to work now, so be a bit considerate. You know the importance of appreciation, right?" His words filled me with the urge to point out his own lack of appreciation, but all I could manage was a deep sigh as I saw him off. "I won't eat dinner tonight. See you," he called out, leaving in a hurry without any explanation. After he left, I took care of the household chores and went shopping as usual. Since he said he wouldn't be home for dinner, I decided to prepare something simple just for myself. However, Just as I was about to start my solitary meal, I heard his unexpected return. "I'm back," he announced. "Welcome back, but you said you didn't need dinner today." "Yeah, but my drinking party got canceled." "I'm hungry. You have something to eat, right?" "Well, I only prepared a meal for myself today." His face contorted with anger upon hearing this. "Didn't you even consider the possibility I might come back? This is unbelievable." He moved to the dining table, and upon seeing the dinner I prepared, his mood worsened further. "What do you call this a meal? I seriously question if you're properly doing your duties as a housewife. Don't waste the money I'm working for." I quickly prepared something for myself. "Please don't get mad like this. Maybe you should learn proper cooking from my mom. Honestly, I've always found your cooking lacking." His constant comparisons to his mother cut deep. "I can't eat this. Go buy something. It's already night, and I've taken a bath. Can't you go buy it yourself?" "Forget it. You forgot to buy beer yesterday, didn't prepare dinner today. It's so frustrating. I'm going back to my parents' place." With that, he stormed out. Left alone in the house, I felt a strange sense of relief. The next morning, as expected, I received an angry call from David's mother. "How can you not serve David a proper meal? This feels like moral harassment, if not worse." I tried to explain what had happened, but she wouldn't accept it. After apologizing just to end the call, my mood plummeted completely. Since David wasn't home, I decided to have a leisurely late brunch. However, the thought of him coming back that night weighed heavily on my mind. Considering yesterday's events, I decided to make tonight's dinner special. I shopped with more care than usual, selecting ingredients and making sure to add David's favorite beer to the cart. I was determined to prepare a dinner that would earn his praise. I shortened my blog update time to allocate more time for cooking. After dedicating ample time to preparations, I set the table beautifully, as if for a special occasion. Looking at it, I felt a sense of accomplishment and couldn't help but praise myself. With this spread, I thought he should definitely be satisfied. I waited patiently in the dining room for David to come home, but as time passed, there was no sign of him. I tried contacting him several times via my smartphone, but there was no response, and I grew increasingly worried as the hours ticked by. 1 hour passed, then 2. I began to get anxious. Had he possibly gone to his parents' house? I called them to check, but they said he hadn't come there either. I tried calling David multiple times, but still no response. As midnight approached, just when I was considering contacting the police, a staggering David returned home, clearly drunk. "I'm home," he slurred. I rushed to the entrance in concern and found him lying on the hallway floor. "What happened? Are you okay?" Hearing my voice, he responded angrily, "Too loud. Go away." He staggered toward the dining room, and when I tried to support him, he forcefully shook off my hand. "Don't touch me. Don't come near me with that ugly face. To think you're my wife." In his drunken state, he spat out those words and then just lay down right there. His remarks were beyond shocking. Why couldn't he consider others' feelings? His words hurt me deeply, and I was filled with thoughts that maybe he no longer saw me as family. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at the elaborate dinner I'd prepared. It was all for nothing. I ate alone, enveloped in loneliness. The next morning, David woke up as if nothing had happened. "My head hurts. I guess I drank too much. But why did you leave me in the hallway?" "You chose to lie down there, David. It's not my fault." "Aren't you my wife? At least take care of me when I'm drunk." His words made me wonder why he always blamed me right away. "If you weren't going to eat at home, you could have at least let me know. I prepared a nice meal and called you multiple times. Why didn't you answer?" "My drinking party from the day before got rescheduled to yesterday. Do I have to report everything? Besides, you know how hard it is to pick up the phone during a gathering. Think about my situation." With every word David said, my heart grew colder, and my expectations of him diminished. I realized that if I lowered my expectations even further, I wouldn't feel hurt or disappointed anymore. A few days later, David made an unexpected suggestion after returning home. "Hey, want to go on a family trip soon?" "Really?" I was surprised by the offer. "But I'm talking about a family trip with my mom and dad. They want to join." I was taken aback. Why would his parents make such a proposal? Tensions existed between me and David's parents, and whenever there was an issue concerning David, they tended to blame me. I'm about to give birth soon, and traveling a long distance might be a bit risky. I expressed my concern. How many times do I have to tell you? Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you're sick. My parents are thoughtfully inviting us. But what if something happens? It'll be fine. Everything's already decided. We'll go for 2 nights and 3 days next week. Next week is my due date. That's a bit. Just do as you're told. Prepare for the trip. End of discussion. David just expressed his opinion and then left the room. I was troubled by this situation. The next day, I sought advice from a close friend and explained everything. She was concerned and agreed that it was too much. While I was contemplating how to decline the offer, the day of the trip suddenly arrived. Actually, I'm not feeling well today. I'm worried about the baby, so I'm going to rest at home. I tried to use that as an excuse, but David didn't seem convinced. Anyway, you can just rest in the car and you'll be fine. Come on, bring the luggage. We're heading to my parents' house, so hurry up. As we headed to the car, I was worried and asked, "Is this really okay?" After loading our luggage into the car and sitting in the passenger seat, I felt warmth at my feet. Looking down, I noticed water spreading around them. Oh my water broke. I immediately informed David. "David, I think my water just broke. Please take me to the hospital quickly." Taken aback by the situation, David exclaimed, "Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious. We need to go to the hospital now. The baby might be coming." While I was trying to clean up the water with a towel in the car, David suddenly opened the passenger door. "David, what are you doing? We need to go to the hospital." "Get out. You're going to make a mess in the car." I was in complete shock. "What are you saying?" I said, "Get out. I need to clean the car." Then David forcefully pulled me out of the car. In this unbelievable situation, he said, "I can't believe this. We were supposed to be on a family trip. Just go to the hospital by yourself." I was too shocked to say anything. As I called out to David, "Wait, how can you leave me here like this?" He drove away, leaving me behind. Feeling overwhelmed, I quickly dialed for an ambulance when someone approached asking, "Lisa, are you okay?" It was Sarah, looking concerned. She immediately recognized my predicament and arranged for a special taxi, comforting me throughout. Grateful for her kindness, tears streamed down my face. Soon after, I safely arrived at the hospital thanks to Sarah's help. On the way, she held my hand and cheered me up, staying by my side until I was taken to my room. While being transferred, I made a silent vow. I will make him pay for this. Even as labor pains grew, Sarah kept holding my hand. Furthermore, she contacted my parents, who soon arrived at the hospital and looked deeply concerned. Sarah whispered to them, "There's something I want to discuss." The 3 then left the room. As the labor pains intensified, my smartphone vibrated from a corner of the room. When my parents checked who it was, they said it was David. They looked displeased, but I took the call anyway. As soon as I answered, I heard a panicky David say, "Help me." However, I was in no state or mood to converse with him and promptly ended the call. Despite my parents turning off my phone, David continued to send messages. As labor intensified, I was finally moved to the delivery room. After enduring the pain for some time, I finally heard my baby's cries. Exhausted, I saw my parents and Sarah standing before me with warm smiles. Relieved, I closed my eyes and rested. When I woke up after a few hours of sleep, I found myself lying in the hospital bed. Rubbing my eyes, I noticed my parents sitting next to me, their faces filled with concern. "Are you okay?" my mother asked gently. Still feeling the weight of exhaustion, I couldn't muster the energy to sit up. While my father looked teary-eyed, my mother consoled him, saying the postpartum period can be exhausting. Witnessing this heartwarming scene, a smile formed on my face. "How's the baby?" I inquired. My parents informed me that the baby was undergoing some tests, but would be back in the room soon. However, I noticed Sarah wasn't present. Responding to my unspoken question, my mother remarked, "Sarah left a little while ago." Thinking about how things might have turned out had Sarah not been there, a feeling of gratitude settled over me. I made a promise with my parents that after being discharged, I would visit Sarah to express my gratitude. Turning on my smartphone to inform my friends about the birth, I was met with an overwhelming number of missed calls, mostly from David. The sheer number left me momentarily stunned, but I felt no hope or expectation from his calls, so I closed the notifications without hesitation. One of my friends visited the hospital room to congratulate me on the birth. As she rejoiced and extended her genuine wishes, I opened up about the recent incidents with David. After hearing the story, she expressed both shock and anger, half-jokingly saying she'd like to punish him a bit. But she also emphasized that my health and rest were paramount. My parents, already briefed by Sarah about the whole episode, asked, "What are you planning to do next?" I shared my thoughts about my relationship with David and told my parents I was considering divorce. They respected my decision and provided their support. Upon my discharge, I planned to stay at my parents' house, where they had prepared a room for me. Meanwhile, David seemed to have visited the hospital, but as I had informed the hospital staff that I didn't wish to see him, he wasn't allowed in. The next day, Sarah came to my hospital room holding a fruit basket. "Sarah, you came?" I exclaimed with delight. "You seem to be recovering well, but remember not to overexert yourself. Postpartum fatigue can be quite profound," she advised. Feeling comforted by Sarah's words, I sighed with relief, taking the fruit basket from her. "Sarah, thank you so much for helping me. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't there." I expressed my deep gratitude as I bowed deeply. Sarah gently laughed, saying, "What's most important is that both you and the baby are healthy. I just lent a small hand. Regardless, I'm forever grateful."
My name is Winnie, and I currently hold an office worker position, a role that I reached after navigating a series of personal and familial challenges. These issues mainly stemmed from the complicated relationships within my family, particularly with my mother, with whom I've had a strained relationship since childhood. This strain was partly because of her stringent nature and also because I bear a resemblance to my father, Melvin, which seemed to exacerbate the tension between us. My father was a kind and honest man, qualities that baffled me as to why he chose to marry my mother, whose primary grievance against him was his modest income. Despite his stable job, my father also harbored aspirations of becoming a cartoon artist, a dream my mother scorned. Nonetheless, his presence was a stabilizing force during my upbringing, and he always supported me, especially concerning my fraught relationship with my mother. As I grew older, our family dynamics shifted dramatically. When I started university, the relationship with my mother worsened, culminating in her decision to divorce my father. She had grown close to a much younger bartender from a nightclub she frequented, a man who would later become my stepfather. His demeanor towards me was dismissive at best, often flaunting his relationship with my mother in hurtful ways. After graduating from university, I struggled to find employment, which forced me to continue living at home with my mother and stepfather. During this period, my mother became pregnant with my sister Isabella, who was born when I was 25 years older. Isabella was undeniably adorable, and despite not resembling our mother, she quickly became the center of her world. My mother often compared us, openly favoring Isabella and predicting a beautiful future for her, in stark contrast to her treatment of me. Life at home became increasingly difficult. My mother, now mostly unemployed and absorbed in Korean dramas, demanded that I take on significant caregiving duties for Isabella. Despite the challenging circumstances, Isabella turned out to be very intelligent and was admitted to a prestigious private kindergarten. Meanwhile, I was earning just enough to get by, without any additional support, living a life largely isolated within my own home. A pivotal moment occurred 6 years ago when I was 31, during a family trip to an amusement park. It was a day that underscored the stark disparities in our family. My wealthy stepfather, driving us in his Porsche, celebrated Isabella's acceptance into a prestigious elementary school. Throughout the day, the conversation revolved around Isabella's future prospects and achievements, highlighting the different expectations placed on us by our parents. This trip was emblematic of the broader challenges I faced within my family, showcasing the contrasting paths my sister and I were on due to the differing degrees of support and expectations from our parents. During that moment in the car, my mother and stepfather burst into laughter, and I sat there stunned by Isabella's cruel words, echoing the bitterness of my mother. That day at the amusement park, they continued to sideline me. On the roller coaster, they rode first, leaving me to ride alone while mocking my fear, joking that life had been tougher on me than the ride. In the haunted house, they went ahead and waited at the exit just to laugh at my fear, commenting on how embarrassing it was to have me as a sister. This behavior was more than enough for me to want to cut ties with them, but the final straw came during our car ride home. I mentioned I needed to use the restroom, but they cruelly suggested I wait until we got home or use the bushes nearby, mocking me further. My humiliation peaked when my stepfather abruptly hit the brakes, claiming he mistook a stuffed toy for an animal, causing me to accidentally let a little out. Their reaction was harsh, criticizing my mistake, with my stepfather saying his Porsche was now dirty and even going as far as to deny my place in the family, likening me to an unwanted relative rather than his stepdaughter, or Isabella's sister. My mother then cruelly suggested I leave if I was so unhappy, claiming she no longer wanted to see a face that reminded her of her former husband. Isabella smugly added that she was happy to be an only child, echoing their sentiments. With my patience exhausted, I decided to leave, no matter how modest my new living situation would be. I moved out of the luxurious apartment and into a rundown one. Although this new place freed me from my toxic family, it was old and not what I had hoped for. I should have saved more before moving, but I needed to escape. In this gloomy period, a surprising letter arrived from my father, breaking years of silence. He apologized for the lack of contact and shared that despite his challenges, he was managing. Reading his words, I realized he was the only genuine person in my family. Meanwhile, I hadn't mentioned earlier, but I have a fiancé named Devin. We met at an inter-industry networking event and now live together. Devin, who works steadily while pursuing his dreams, has never judged my past. He's been nothing but supportive, and he was enthusiastic about moving in with me, despite the simplicity of our apartment. Devin even suggested I visit my biological father, noting there was an address on the envelope. While I'm hesitant because my father hasn't explicitly asked to see me, the thought of reconnecting with him, given everything, feels like a step I might soon be ready to take. I've been thinking it over, and I feel it might be too soon to reach out to my dad. Even though I'm curious, he might have a new family by now, and I don't want to intrude until he's ready to reconnect. Instead, Devin suggested a less direct approach, maybe just catching a glimpse of him from a distance to start. That seemed reasonable. It's been 17 years. He's bound to look different now, and I wonder how he'd react to seeing how much I've changed too. So, I decided to discreetly check on my father this weekend. Rather than loitering outside his place, I thought a nearby diner would offer a good vantage point. Thanks to Google Maps, I confirmed there's one right across from his apartment. It's amazing how technology makes these things so straightforward. From what I could see, his life seemed much like mine, unpretentious and modest. He was still chasing his dream of becoming a cartoon artist, a tough path indeed. Observing him from afar, it was clear he hadn't given up, despite the disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes that spoke of his ongoing struggles. It was a tough sight, seeing him look so worn and defeated. Suddenly feeling overwhelmed, I decided to leave the diner without ordering. I couldn't shake off the image of his weary expression. If he had seemed happy, maybe I'd have approached him. Devin suggested maybe I should send a casual letter to see how he responds. It's a small gesture, but it might open a door. Returning home, I was taken aback to find a letter in the mailbox, from my mother, of all people. We hadn't spoken in 9 years, not since the day she harshly sent me away. It was shocking. Why would she want to reach out now? The letter inside was even more astonishing. She was asking to visit me. What could have prompted this change of heart? Devin and I speculated about her sudden desire to reconnect. Could she be regretting her past actions? Or perhaps something more urgent was at play, like a serious illness. It was a confusing and concerning development. How did she even find my address? It seemed likely she might have used something straightforward like the family registry, which wouldn't be too difficult for her to access. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet her. If she was indeed ill, it seemed right to at least see what she wanted. With the visit set for next week, the anxiety was palpable. Asked Devin to be there with me, needing his support. Finally, the day arrived. After a restless night, the thought of seeing her after all these years filled me with a mix of dread and curiosity. True to form, I expected her to arrive as flamboyantly as ever. As I anticipated my mother's arrival, I couldn't shake the thought that she'd comment dismissively on the simplicity of my living space. That's just how she is. Despite wishing she'd just leave quickly, a part of me also dreaded her coming at all. It's a complex mix of emotions. Just as I wrestled with these thoughts, the doorbell rang, snapping me back to reality. With a nervous hand, I approached the door and peered through the peephole. Standing there wasn't the flashy, overbearing mother I remembered, but a figure who seemed frail, dressed in subdued clothing. So different, it was startling. "Winnie, it's been a long time. I really wanted to see you," she said, her voice weaker than I remembered. "Mom, what happened to you? You've lost so much weight, and these clothes..." I couldn't hide my shock. Was she ill? To my surprise, she apologized right there in the hallway. "Winnie, I was wrong. I want you to forgive me for everything I did to you." Bewildered by her sudden change of demeanor and confession, I let her in and introduced her to Devin. As we started talking, she began to open up about her recent hardships, which were linked to my stepfather. "He got caught up in a scam and was arrested," she explained. "This was the man who always seemed flush with cash, mysteriously affluent for a bartender. It turned out his wealth came from shady dealings in gambling and stocks." As we delved deeper into her story, I learned that the strain of these events had drastically altered her appearance and demeanor. It was a relief to learn she wasn't physically sick, but the emotional toll was evident. She admitted her mistakes in choosing to be with him, affecting not just herself but me too. It was a lot to process. Then she brought up Isabella, the sister who had always seemed to have everything laid out for her. With her father's arrest, she's had to leave her prestigious school. Now, she's attending a public school, my mother said, her tone tinged with regret. Despite our rocky past, I felt a pang of sympathy for Isabella. The revelation continued, however. My mother hesitated before dropping another bombshell. "There's more I need to tell you about Isabella. She's actually not his daughter." Turns out, during my mother's frequent nights out, she had relationships with other men, including one who was a university researcher by day and a bartender by night. He was Isabella's biological father. Isabella's intellect and cunning, uncharacteristic of her supposed father, suddenly made a lot more sense. Sitting there, listening to my mother unravel these revelations, was surreal. It seemed that the truths hidden beneath our family's facade were as convoluted as the relationships that defined it. Now, with all these new insights, I was left to ponder what all this meant for our future interactions. I was truly taken aback by the revelations about Isabella's parentage. Learning that her biological father was not only a university researcher, but also notably handsome, made sense of the comments about Isabella's looks. But what shocked me even more was the drama that unfolded around this discovery. When the truth about Isabella's real father surfaced, unearthed by a detective hired by my stepfather just before his arrest, it felt like something straight out of a soap opera. It was almost humorous, though in a bitter, ironic way. But the chaos didn't end there. During her visit, after recounting these convoluted family secrets, my mother revealed the real reason behind her sudden reappearance. She admitted, rather sheepishly, that after my stepfather was bailed out, their finances were in ruins, leading her to ask me for money. The audacity of her request left me speechless. There she was, not much changed at heart, despite her less glamorous appearance, driven by financial desperation rather than familial affection. "Winnie, the bail money took everything we had. I was hoping you could help us out," she explained, as if it were the most natural thing to ask. The nerve of it, after all the years of neglect and harsh treatment, to come asking for money was beyond belief. But she tried to justify it. "I've apologized, haven't I? We're family, and isn't this when we should help each other?" Family? When had she ever acted like family to me? My patience snapped. How can you even ask that after everything? The situation escalated quickly. She even dared to ask about my earnings and wanted to see my bank book. That was the last straw. I couldn't hold back any longer. With Devin trying to calm things down, I ended up pushing her out the door, along with her requests and her apologies. A week after that tumultuous visit, as I was still processing the events, another letter arrived. This time from my father. With Devon by my side, I opened it, half expecting more bad news. Instead, it contained the most incredible update. My father had finally achieved his dream of becoming a cartoon artist. His work was not only published but also received positive acclaim, leading to contracts for further adaptations, both animated and live action. "Dad, congratulations," I exclaimed, overwhelmed with joy and relief. It felt like a beacon of positivity after the storm. I immediately penned a response, expressing my eagerness to meet him and celebrate his success. He replied promptly, inviting us to visit him the following week. "Let's meet next week. I'm really looking forward to seeing you, Winnie," his letter read. Filled with anticipation, Devon and I arrived at my father's apartment on the designated day. As I was about to ring the doorbell, I heard the lively sounds of children and a woman from inside. A moment of surprise washed over me, but as the door opened, there was my father, beaming with pride. "Winnie, it's been long. You've grown up well. And this must be your fiancé, Devon. You've chosen a fine young man," he greeted us warmly. Standing there, at the threshold of a new chapter, I realized how much I had to catch up on with him. The presence of a family inside his apartment suggested new stories to be shared. After so many years of disconnect, this reunion was not just a meeting but a fresh start for all of us. As I approached my father's apartment with Devon, eager for our reunion, I was immediately struck by voices coming from inside. My heart sank a bit. Had I misjudged the situation? When my father opened the door, he looked both happy and slightly apologetic. "I'm sorry I didn't mention earlier. I've remarried," he confessed. The presence of a new family was unexpected, but explained the joyful noise. After a brief, awkward moment, we decided to relocate to the familiar diner nearby. This time, the atmosphere was more relaxed, and we were able to enjoy a meal while catching up. Sitting there with my father, it felt as if we were rewinding the clock, with nostalgia warming our conversation. I congratulated him on his successful debut as a cartoon artist and his new contracts for adaptations. His face lit up with a mix of relief and pride. It nearly didn't happen. I had quit my job to focus fully on this dream. There was a point where it caused quite a bit of tension at home, he shared. The reason for his prior hesitations about meeting up became clear. He had been waiting until his career was stable before reconnecting. He revealed that the day I had seen him from the diner, looking so desolate, was actually when his new wife had temporarily left with their children, overwhelmed by the uncertainty of his career shift. Fortunately, with his debut success and an increase in royalties, he moved to a better apartment and his family returned and reconciled. "I hope to finally provide a good life for my children," he said, reflecting on his past struggles. "I was an insufficient father before, but maybe this can make up for it." As we discussed, I shared the shocking truths about my mother's past. Even my father, who I thought knew her well, was taken aback by the details. This conversation helped clarify why he had originally been drawn to my mother despite her challenging personality. He had seen potential material for his cartoons in her complex character. As we wrapped up, my father turned to Devon, expressing his hope for continued support despite his imperfections. Devon reassured him warmly, "Don't worry, and thank you. I'm just happy to see your dreams coming true, and I hope for even more success for you in the future." Returning home to our apartment after these heartfelt exchanges, I was confronted by an unexpected and unsettling scene. There stood my mother, her troublesome husband, and a teenage girl who must be Isabella, now much older. "Why are you here again?" I asked, stunned. Their response was typical, tinged with the same old unpleasantness. My mother retorted, "Really, Winnie, you're as annoying as ever." I tried to maintain a calm, suggesting we all settle down inside. The tension hinted at deeper troubles. Rumors of fraud involving my mother and her husband had surfaced, apparently tied to some dubious activities at the nightclub. They defensively claimed it was all a misunderstanding, just minor missteps blown out of proportion. Exasperated, I finally asked, "What do you want now?" It was clear from their evasive answers and the eventual admission that they were seeking financial help to hire a lawyer. "You're my biological child, aren't you? It's only natural you should help out a bit," my mother asserted, while Isabella chimed in, reinforcing their familial claims to coax support. Their real motive was painfully obvious: money. Despite the chaos, I knew one thing for certain: this mess wouldn't touch the life I was building or the upcoming wedding. They were not invited. As I stood in my doorway, facing this unexpected reunion, I prepared to address this new chapter with as much grace as I could muster, determined to keep my future free of turmoil. I've reached a point where I no longer care about the future of these people. Maybe that sounds harsh, but it seems to me they demand far too much from me. During a particularly tense moment, one of them dismissed Devin's intervention by questioning his right to speak up, belittling him as just a regular employee. I was on edge, ready to react heatedly, but then the atmosphere took a sudden turn. "Excuse me for saying this, but like Winnie's real father, I also have big ambitions," Devin declared, his voice steady. "Even as I approach my 40s, my dream is to pass the bar exam and become a prosecutor." His goal was indeed a noble one, drawing a mixed reaction of doubt and surprise from the group. Just as I was about to let my frustration show physically, Devin caught my hand, stopping me. He continued, "I aspire to be a prosecutor because my father works in the prosecutor's office." This revelation noticeably shifted their mocking tone to one of cautious interest. As they tried to leverage this new information, pleading with Devin to intervene on their behalf by appealing to his familial ties, I made a silent, firm decision to remove them from my apartment. Days later, I attended a special party hosted by a publishing house to celebrate the release of my father's new book. At the event, which included my father, his new wife, and their children, someone asked about my mother. "We've cut ties," I replied. "That part of my family doesn't matter to me anymore." It was a hard stance, but one I felt necessary. Interestingly, my father's book debut was a cartoon about a character remarkably similar to my mother, a housewife with a domineering personality who alienates those around her. This unique story caught the attention of many, including a publishing editor. Ironically, my mother, thinking she was the inspiration, contacted me demanding compensation for being portrayed. It was no surprise. She hadn't changed a bit. Cutting ties seemed more justified than ever. Later, I learned that my stepfather was prosecuted and received a life sentence. My mother, needing to make ends meet, took her first formal job as a hostess in a bar, a place introduced to her through the nightclub connections of her husband. Isabella, on the other hand, continued her studies within the local community, hoping her efforts would eventually pay off. Meanwhile, Devin and I have grown closer to my father's new family, even moving into the luxurious apartment he owns. We've built a deep bond with them, and as we settle into this new chapter, we eagerly anticipate the day when Devin's dreams of becoming a prosecutor come true. This new familial connection, forged in the face of past difficulties, promises a future filled with hope and the potential for redemption. If I pick up the drinks everyone requested, I'll finally get a chance to rest. But for now, I need to keep going. Interestingly, the left side of my body hasn't moved freely since my sophomore year, when I was on the high school softball team. One day, on my way to a match, I was involved in a car accident. The details are fuzzy, but that day altered the course of my life. Although rigorous rehabilitation allowed me to walk again, my left side stayed partially paralyzed, making my cane an essential companion. It was hard to imagine then that I'd rely on a cane at such a young age. Yet, once I embraced this new reality, I found ways to adapt and make things work. After buying drinks for everyone, I returned to the meeting spot, expecting my family to be waiting, but they were nowhere to be seen. Confident I was in the right place, I set the drinks down on a nearby sofa and scanned the area. They weren't there. Instead, they were halfway through the security screening. My father had taken care of our plane tickets, and his being screened without me meant I was going to miss our flight. Resigned, I called him. His response was quick and dismissive. "Oh, I completely forgot about you. Just drink what you bought and head home whenever you want." The call was brief, and just like that, I was left behind. Being overlooked wasn't new to me. My parents and sister, Arlette, often treated me this way. "You've become so calm lately, haven't you? Maybe the accident did something to your brain," they'd joke. I used to be quick to anger, but since the accident, I've felt different, more detached, as if the dramas of life were unfolding at a distance. The doctor tried to explain the emotional impacts of my trauma, but I barely remembered his explanations. Looking back, I realized I'd never play softball again, something I had passionately dedicated myself to. Most might feel despair in such moments, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself thinking, well, what now? It felt like I was dealing with someone else's issues. So, when I was forgotten at the airport, I wasn't upset. I promptly went to the airline counter to sort out how I could still get to my destination. The staff there was incredibly helpful, assisting with everything from luggage to boarding. Though I missed my initial flight, I didn't let that stop me. I quickly secured a spot on the next available flight and updated the hotel about my delayed arrival. My journey continued, undeterred by the setbacks, driven by a newfound resilience and a calm acceptance of life's unpredictable twists. I never planned to cancel my trip. Backing out just wasn't in the cards for me. Honestly, returning home seemed like more hassle than it was worth. Despite the added expense, I was determined to reach my goal, especially after coming this far. With the airport staff's excellent assistance, I breezed through the security check and was escorted to the boarding gate, where they also helped with my luggage. As I settled near the gate, enjoying a moment of peace, my smartphone erupted with a flurry of calls. The missed call log grew alarmingly. Wow, that's a lot of calls. It's a bit overwhelming. "Everything okay, Mom?" "Oh, sorry, here's my ticket." "Yes, everything's fine, thanks." Yeah, managing the phone with a cane is a bit tricky. "I'll return these calls once I land. Thanks for asking." Despite the peculiar interaction, I pocketed my phone and boarded the plane. I informed the helpful airport staff that I would make my return calls upon arrival, which seemed like a manageable plan. Settling into my designated seat, I switched my phone to airplane mode, which had been buzzing nonstop, and decided to enjoy the flight. 3 hours later, I landed safely and found a bench at the baggage claim to wait for my luggage. Time to return those calls, I thought, turning off airplane mode. To my astonishment, my phone displayed over 100 missed calls, a new record for me. Calls from Dad, Mom, and even my rarely communicative sister, Arlette, totaled up to 105. Maybe I'm more important to them than I thought, I mused. "Hello, Dad, what's going on? Why all the calls?" I inquired. "Where are you now? You didn't head back home, did you?"
Good. Come here quickly.
"Everything's a mess. The hotel tried to charge us way more than expected, and they say you're somehow involved. It's all confusing. Please hurry. Our plans are a disaster without you," he replied, his tone urgent. "Got it. I'll be there as soon as I grab my luggage." "Wait for me," I said, ending the call. After collecting my bags, I ambled towards the taxi stand, feeling a mix of emotions. It was perplexing. Dad, who had seemed to forget about me earlier, was now urgently seeking my help as soon as his plans went awry. With no real urgency, I slowly approached the taxi, where the driver promptly assisted with my bags. "Mom, let me help you with that," I offered. "Thank you. Could you put it in the trunk?" she asked. As the driver loaded my luggage, I felt a sincere gratitude for the kindness of strangers, which stood in stark contrast to my family's recent indifference. "To the Royal Bayside Hotel, please," I directed the driver. "Did you travel alone?" he asked, possibly sensing my situation was unusual. "Yes, that's right. I was supposed to be with my family, but there was a misunderstanding," I explained briefly. "That sounds tough," he empathized. I smiled wryly. "Well, I don't feel obligated to cover for them." I knew explaining everything to the taxi driver wouldn't change my family dynamics, so I settled back, ready to face whatever awaited me at the hotel. Growing up in my family felt like living under a strict regime. From a young age, I sensed a significant difference between my household and those of my peers. My parents were demanding, possibly because of my father's background as a professional and well-known softball player. He often voiced his expectations for me, proudly declaring at school functions, "Flora, you're going to surpass me. You have a natural talent. You must become a great player. Can you do that?" His words were backed by my mother's similar sentiments, though she often lamented my academic struggles, saying, "You've inherited your father's excellent athletic skills, but aren't you bad at studying? It would have been nice if you had taken after me in that aspect." My dad would then chime in, "If you had been more like your mom, you might have more options. But you're like me, not good at studying. That's a problem. You have to work hard to become a better professional softball player than me." Both parents agreed that having their talents was natural for me and expected nothing less than excellence. This prideful atmosphere at home meant constant pressure to excel, at least in one thing, pushing me toward extraordinary efforts every day. As a child, I took these comments at face value, not fully grasping their true intention, which as an adult, I recognized was more about fulfilling their own egos than nurturing my interests. Throughout my schooling, from elementary through high school, my parents tightly controlled my schedule, insisting that any free time be devoted to training or practicing softball. My personal desires were completely overlooked, and I grew up to be an obedient child who adhered strictly to my father's directives. Reflecting on my childhood and adolescent years, the dominant memories are of softball practices, games, and intensive training sessions. Other than that, I recall a harsh home environment where no amount of effort seemed enough to earn praise. By middle school, I was perpetually irritable, like a kettle ready to boil over. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what made me so angry. I just knew I disliked everything. Frequent arguments with my sister Arlette, who played her games next to me while I trained, were common. "Stop that, Flora. Why would you hit her?" My mom would scold me when Arlette's activities disrupted my focus. "She has her room. She should play there. Why does she have to play right next to me?" I would retort. Our household was constantly tense. During my rebellious phase, I clashed often with my dad. What was with today's game? A pitcher returning like, "That is the worst, Flora. Don't act so high and mighty when you can't do it yourself," he'd criticize after a game. If I talked back, the situation would escalate quickly. "Say that one more time," he'd challenge, and disagreements would often lead to him hitting me. Objectively, my family environment was far from normal. Dominated by anger and excessive pride from my parents, I had no real freedom. Despite this, as a child, I felt obliged to meet their high expectations. Even when I advanced to high school, nothing changed. It was all about practice and more practice, with no room for anything else in my life. Growing up, even the simple joy of eating what I liked was off limits. I was on a strictly controlled nutritional plan and treated more like a piece of sports equipment than a person. Despite this, I relentlessly strived to live up to my parents' lofty expectations. To an outsider, my everyday life could have seemed unbearable, and unexpectedly, it came to a halt. On my way to a softball match, I was hit by a truck while crossing at a green light. The accident was severe. My bike was utterly destroyed, a stark testament to the crash's intensity. Witnesses were deeply shocked, and the police noted their distress. Miraculously, I survived, but the accident left me with a permanent disability on my left side. This incident dramatically changed my perspective. No longer able to meet the athletic expectations of my parents, I surprisingly found myself devoid of despair or sadness. Everything felt inconsequential, and I found it difficult to engage deeply with any thoughts or emotions. While recovering, I overheard a distressing conversation between my parents. "She's finished. Her path as a softball player is over. But we still have Arlette. Unlike Flora, she excels in everything, not just academics and sports, but in other areas too." This moment was pivotal. I realized my parents' true priorities. It burst something inside me, a realization more profound than fear or anger. These two are wrong, I thought, marking a profound shift in how I viewed them and their parenting. Post-accident, My parents transferred their intense expectations to Arlette, and I carried a sense of guilt toward her because of it. Fast forward to the present, I had just arrived at the destination hotel. The taxi driver unloaded my luggage with care. "Have you forgotten anything? Need help to the lobby?" he kindly offered. "Oh no, thank you. I can manage myself," I replied, appreciating his warm demeanor as I entered the hotel. Inside, a voice called out, "Sis, you finally made it." It had been ages since anyone called me that. It was Arlette, rushing over to help with my luggage. "Really, Dad is the worst, isn't he? Don't worry about the plane. At least you're here now. Aren't you tired?" The familiar faces of my family greeted me, yet they seemed like entirely different people, their mannerisms strangely artificial. As we approached the front desk, the commotion caught the attention of Walker Perry, the manager of the Royal Bayside Hotel. "Miss Flora, welcome. It's great to see you doing well. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask," he greeted us warmly. I responded with a light-hearted, "I couldn't possibly impose that much." Walker then mentioned his son, Jacob, who had arrived a day earlier. "Jacob was looking forward to meeting you. I wish he'd take his studies more seriously, but he perked up when he heard you were coming." "I'll go even if I have to take a break," he insisted. Walker's familiarity hinted at our long-standing connection. Indeed, Jacob and I were not only former classmates but also teammates from middle to high school. I had a slight hand in managing the hotel as well, a fact known to few but significant in its own right. Even when I was confined to a hospital bed, unable to rise, Jacob visited daily without fail. He was a true friend, keeping me connected to school life and maintaining our friendship as if nothing had changed, even after doctors said I'd never play softball again. His support was unwavering during my rehabilitation. He'd often say, "If you need anything, just let me know. I'm here to support you fully." But interestingly, Jacob also shared his troubles with me regularly, making our interactions quite unique. During one of these visits, he mentioned that the hotel managed by my father was struggling. Although I was still battling with limited mobility, this sparked my interest, and I began to study various subjects more out of boredom than anything else. Jacob, always perceptive, noticed this. "Are you projecting yourself and your dad onto each other?" he asked one day, his intuition often strikingly accurate, which could be a bit unsettling. "Yes, I've been studying marketing," I admitted, though I was only just scratching the surface and didn't fully grasp it yet. Jacob, curious, wondered, "What's marketing exactly?" Explaining briefly, I related it to sports. It's like securing a starting position on a team. You have to sell yourself and showcase your strengths. Jacob suggested I talk directly to his dad once I was a bit better. "I really don't get the complicated stuff, and frankly, it's a hassle to relay it. You should explain it directly." This candid admission led to my introduction to Walker, his father, once I was discharged. Despite my ongoing recovery, Walker and I had many productive discussions about the hotel's management strategy. Our collaborative efforts soon paid off, with the hotel gaining popularity, trending on social media, and seeing a significant uptick in guest traffic. "I can't thank you enough," Walker often said, impressed by the business strategies we developed. "You're so young, yet you think of such excellent ideas." His gratitude was genuine, and he even invited me. "Once you get well, please visit our hotel." "That's the plan," I responded with a hopeful smile, though Walker's expression was more complex. Through these efforts, I found a new purpose: to visit the hotel I had helped turn around. This goal became a driving force in my life, motivating me through the grueling rehabilitation process. Thankfully, my condition improved steadily, allowing me to walk short distances on my own. Upon finally arriving at the hotel, Walker didn't lead me to a guest room as expected, but to his office. "There's something I need to confirm," he said intriguingly as we walked. Meanwhile, the front desk staff handled my luggage, directing it to the room I had booked in this formal and grand hotel. This was a new, unfamiliar setting for me, but it was filled with potential and a sense of achievement. The hotel room was surprisingly cozy, a sharp contrast to the tension that had unfolded upon my arrival. Walker, the hotel manager, inquired about the discrepancies in my family story regarding my late arrival. I could overlook it. I remarked casually when Walker probed for clarification. What exactly do you mean by that? Walker asked, his tone curious yet cautious. Well, I began. They claimed they were thirsty and sent me to fetch drinks. Due to my slower pace, by the time I returned, they had already moved on to the security checkpoint without me. Walker's expression hardened slightly, the gravity in his voice palpable. Already? That's quite convenient. They assumed going through security first would save time, I explained. Walker addressed them directly, his calm demeanor sharpening. You do realize one cannot pass through security without their ticket? My father fumbled with his words. That was my mistake. I thought I had handed Flora her ticket. As my parents stumbled through their explanations, Walker cut them off. It seems your demeanor changed once you knew of my connection with Flora. Initially, you were quite assertive with the front desk staff. Well, about that, they started, but Walker continued. Your daughter's contributions have transitioned our hotel into an exclusive private club. New members typically pay a $32,000 initial fee on the day they register. That's different from what we initially understood. My mother interjected softly. I need to speak plainly here, I said, addressing Walker with respect but firmness. It's difficult for me to understand how parents could treat a child who has faced and overcome so much with such indifference. It doesn't seem fitting for any parent who truly values their child. Our family issues are ours to handle. It's not your place to judge, my father retorted sharply. Walker nodded in acknowledgement. Understood. However, I felt it necessary to clarify my earlier comments. He turned back to my family, his stance resolute. The special membership offer was extended in gratitude for Flora's efforts. It was meant for her alone. Your actions towards her do not reflect the values we cherish here. Conclusively, he stated, I must ask you to leave immediately. We will continue to extend our hospitality to Ms. Flora Martin alone. Please refrain from using our services in the future. Security personnel, imposing yet discreet, appeared and escorted my family out. Once alone, Walker apologized to me. I hope you accept our sincere apologies for any disrespect shown. There are principles from which we cannot deviate. I chuckled lightly, dismissing his concern. It's fine. It changes nothing for me. Walker seemed puzzled. And what does this mean for you? Reflecting for a moment, I smiled. It means I'm free. This situation hasn't shocked me. Rather, it confirmed that being with or without them doesn't affect my happiness. I think I'm ready to explore life on my own after a little while here. It was a new idea, one I wasn't entirely committed to yet, but it was appealing and untroubling. That had been my underlying feeling all along. As we left the office, the security team discreetly escorted me to my room. One of them remarked, "It's an honor to have you here, the person who played a key role in saving our hotel." Their recognition was a sweet reminder of my newfound independence and the respect I had earned on my terms. I had somehow expected someone older to greet me at the hotel. Sorry if I didn't meet your expectations, I joked, unable to hide my surprise. The staff member chuckled warmly. Not at all. We have the manager's approval, and during your stay, we're dedicated to supporting you wholeheartedly. Please let us know if there's anything you need. The enthusiasm seemed overwhelming, almost too intense. It felt as if the entire hotel staff was aware of my backstory. I was greeted with polite nods and eager handshakes, which I found quite perplexing and a bit overwhelming. Noticing my discomfort, the security team, clad in black like bodyguards, subtly shielded me from the overzealous staff. Just as I settled onto the sofa, hoping for a moment of peace, there was a knock at the door. I thought I was finally going to have some rest. Yes, come in, I sighed. A familiar voice followed. Hey, best friend, how's it going? Jacob. Wow, it's been a while. I guess you took time off just for me? You should feel grateful, I teased. You just wanted a break from school, didn't you? I countered, knowing him too well. Don't point that out, hey? I heard your parents left you at the airport. That's hilarious. It's seriously a funny story, right? They really did leave me. I'm just glad I didn't end up at the lost and found. Imagine, Flora Martin from so-and-so is at the Lost and Found. Please come pick her up. That would be a riot, Jacob joked, trying to lighten the mood. Stop it. I'm laughing so hard it's making me even more tired, I said, a genuine laugh escaping me despite the fatigue. Reuniting with my best friend like this was refreshing, making the weariness of travel and the drama with my family momentarily melt away. Softball had been my whole world, and when I thought I had lost that part of my life, it felt as though I'd lost my purpose. Throughout this, Jacob was the only one who consistently treated me like Flora Martin, not just another high school student or a potential softball prodigy. It was odd but incredible how he introduced me to his hotel manager father, who actually listened to the ideas of an inexperienced amateur like me. Few would take a high school student's plan seriously, especially one aimed at reviving a nearly bankrupt hotel. But there was a genuine trust between Jacob and his father, and it seemed they both genuinely cared about me. I was incredibly lucky to have such a friend. The afternoon was peaceful as I reflected on these thoughts. My stay at the hotel was initially planned for just a week. However, life had other plans. I've been enjoying the single life for a while thanks to some complicated job posting rules, but having you here, Flora, has been a big help, Jacob admitted one evening. Why is that, I wonder? I mused. I'm now living with Walker. At first, he seemed very formal and strict, but at home, he's surprisingly easygoing and warm. Rely on me more. Think of me as your father if that helps, he suggested one day, almost like a confession. It startled me at first, but living with him turned out to be surprisingly comfortable. He never imposed, always maintaining a calm demeanor that made it incredibly easy to feel at home. Then, changing the subject slightly, Jacob mentioned, I heard through the grapevine, Flora, feel free to ignore this, but your sister seems to have been rejected for a school recommendation. News travels fast, huh? Apparently, her bad attitude was witnessed by other people. I didn't know the details, but it was clear that life was swiftly moving forward, full of unexpected turns and new beginnings. It seems my sister's recent troubles have stirred quite a bit of drama. Her club activities, school grades, and friendships are all faltering. Is it karma, maybe? Jacob joked lightly during one of our chats. Are you enjoying her misfortune? He asked, noticing my nonchalant response. No, not really, I replied, shrugging slightly. You sound quite detached, even though it's about your own sister. They say the opposite of love is indifference, Jacob remarked, half teasing, half serious.
Ooh, scary.
I'd better work hard not to be thought of that way, he laughed, changing the subject. By the way, is today's meeting at 5 p.m.? Yes, that's right. I confirmed. I've arranged for a ride, so don't worry about it. Currently, I'm enjoying the freedom of working as a freelancer, not tied down to any particular organization. This independence allows me to continue my work in a way that feels liberating and fulfilling. Living with Walker has turned out to be a peculiarly delightful arrangement. It's like having a new family where I can be myself without any pretenses. Jacob plans to visit again by the end of the year, and while I look forward to our time together, I know I need to remind him to keep the noise down at night to ensure Walker can rest well. Living this way, balancing personal freedom with the comfort of a makeshift family, has brought an unexpected contentment to my life, and I cherish every moment of this unique journey. At 28, my life revolves largely around fitness, health, and now, unexpectedly, a bit of drama too. I work as a fitness trainer and run a health blog, a combination that led me to Benjamin at the sports center. His infectious energy was impossible to overlook, and soon, we found ourselves swept up in a whirlwind romance. Let me paint a picture of a pivotal summer day when I was about to meet Benjamin's family for the first time. Despite the heat, I chose a simple, knee-length dress with short sleeves, thinking it was understated yet appropriate. Benjamin had hinted that his family was quite traditional and protective, especially his mother, Emma, who he described with an ambiguous tone. Her strong opinions, he cautioned, shouldn't be taken personally. Advice I'd soon realize was more of a forewarning. Upon arriving at their home, Benjamin's younger brother Jack greeted us warmly, his smile a welcome relief. Then Emma appeared, and the atmosphere seemed to cool instantly. Her gaze lingered critically on me, particularly my arms, due to the summer heat. "Is this how you dress to meet your future mother-in-law? A bit bold, don't you think?" she remarked sharply. Stunned, I struggled for a response but managed to express that I thought my outfit was decent and comfortable given the weather. Emma, however, was not appeased, stressing the importance of first impressions. Benjamin intervened, trying to defuse the tension, but Emma's disapproval was palpable. Dinner was fraught with tension. Emma's earlier comments cast a shadow over the evening, although Jack tried to keep things light with jokes and stories, for which I was grateful. Benjamin offered me reassuring glances, but the discomfort lingered. Later, while helping with the dishes, Emma took me aside. "I'm just looking out for my son," she said. "He's a good boy, and I don't want him to make a mistake." I was taken aback, assuring her of my genuine love for Benjamin and my serious intentions, but she remained skeptical. The ride home was somber. Benjamin apologized for his mother's behavior, clearly distressed himself. We both acknowledged the potential difficulties ahead if this was how things were starting. As we plunged into wedding planning, Benjamin and I were enthusiastic, choosing decorations, tasting cakes, and selecting outfits. I fell for a stunning yet somewhat bold wedding dress, which I adored until Emma saw it. "You plan on wearing that in front of the whole family? It looks like you're aiming for a beach party rather than a wedding," she exclaimed upon seeing it. I attempted to brush it off, mentioning the modern style and the warm weather, but it was clear that navigating our future with Emma would require patience, understanding, and perhaps a bit of strategic compromise. Benjamin gently squeezed my hand, signaling me to avoid an argument we were unlikely to win. However, Emma's displeased expression and her muttering about tradition and decency as she walked away made it clear she was not happy. If a mere dress could cause such a stir, I wondered what else awaited us after this initial disagreement with her. After the clash, things settled into a strained normalcy. I immersed myself in work and my blog, which was a sanctuary for me, a space where I felt in control and could express my passion for fitness and health. It never occurred to me that this same passion would once again cause unrest. One relaxed evening, as Benjamin and I lounged on the sofa, he began to frown at something on his phone. "We need to talk," he said gravely. I sat up, alarmed. "What's wrong?" He showed me my Instagram profile, pointing out the comments under my latest post. Supportive, some flirty, but nothing unusual. "It's my mom," Benjamin sighed. "She's making a big deal out of every single male comment, spinning it like you're inviting attention." I felt a surge of frustration. "It's just Instagram," I protested. "People comment. That's how it works." Benjamin agreed, but explained that his mother was convincing everyone I was being unfaithful. The suggestion that I might need to police who can comment on my posts was well-intentioned but maddening. I refused to censor my account just because his mother had a distorted perception of me. As the Instagram drama continued, with Emma twisting my every move into a scandal, things became even more complicated. Jack, a co-worker who lived nearby, started giving me rides home from the gym. It was a simple matter of convenience, but not in Emma's eyes. At a family dinner, she made pointed remarks about Jack's presence, insinuating something more. Tension escalated, with Benjamin caught between defending me and managing his family dynamics. The drive home that night was painfully silent, the air thick with unspoken accusations. I was astonished at how low Emma could stoop, using Jack's kindness as a weapon. Finally, I reached my breaking point. I told Benjamin that his mother was no longer welcome in our home. Her constant insinuations were too much to bear. It felt like declaring war, and Emma's reaction was explosive. This conflict had escalated to a boiling point I had never anticipated. When Emma found out about my decision to limit her visits, she was outraged, but by then, her constant criticisms and accusations had drained me of any patience. However, The real turmoil began a few months later when I discovered I was pregnant. What should have been a time of joy quickly devolved into chaos. Upon hearing the news, Emma started spreading a vile rumor, suggesting to Benjamin that the child might not be his, given the many men at the gym. "How do you know it's yours?" She poisoned his mind with doubt. Witnessing the change in Benjamin as he absorbed his mother's toxic words was heart-wrenching. The doubt in his eyes felt like a betrayal, eroding the strong bond we once shared. One evening, after overhearing another of their troubling phone conversations, I confronted him. "So, you think I'm cheating? That this baby isn't yours?" My voice was sharp, tinged with hurt and anger. Benjamin appeared conflicted, a shadow of himself. "I don't know what to think anymore, Erica. My mom, she's got all these ideas." I interrupted him, my disbelief evident in every word. He offered no defense, just shuffled his feet and avoided my gaze. His silence was more telling than any words could have been. From that moment, our relationship grew colder. Our interactions were terse, the atmosphere heavy with suspicion and doubt. The joy of expecting our baby was overshadowed by this looming cloud. When our baby boy was born, his fair hair and bright blue eyes filled me with hope that perhaps our family could heal. However, instead of mending fences, his appearance only fueled more speculation because of my brunette, dark-eyed husband. In desperation, I showed Emma and Benjamin childhood photos of myself, blonde and blue-eyed, just like our son, trying to explain genetics. Emma remained skeptical, scoffing at the timing of these genetic traits and hinting that Jack's similar features didn't help my case. The tension reached a breaking point at our son's first birthday party. In front of all our guests, Emma demanded a DNA test, proclaiming loudly that the child looked nothing like her son. I was furious and humiliated. "Are you out of your mind, Emma? Accusing me in front of everyone?" I retorted, my voice laden with indignation. Just when I needed Benjamin's support the most, he sided with his mother. "Actually, we're doing it," he stated coldly. "If you've got nothing to hide, then there's no issue. We do the test or we're done. I can't be married to someone I don't trust." I was stunned. "You're serious right now? You're choosing your mom's craziness over me, over your son?" He was unmoved, his stance firm. "It's not just my mom. There's too much doubt and too much talk. The test will settle this one way or another." The ultimatum shattered any remaining trust between us, marking a painful chapter in what had once been a loving relationship. With a heavy heart, I confronted the situation. "Pack your bags and stay somewhere else." "I can't look at you, not now, with these doubts." Benjamin's words pierced through me, leaving a bitter coldness behind. There I was, hastily packing, my hands trembling from a mix of fury and pain, while our baby boy watched, his innocent eyes wide, unaware as his secure world began to fall apart. Driven by desperation, I found refuge at the only place I felt safe, my mother's house. She greeted me with open arms. Barely inside, I broke down, explaining through sobs, "He's kicked us out, Mom. All because of some DNA test. Emma has convinced him we need it." My mom's anger flared, and she was ready to confront Benjamin. "Over my dead body," she fumed. But I held her back. "No, it's not worth it, not now." That night was long and sleepless. I replayed every moment, trying to understand how our love had unraveled to this point, doubting our baby's paternity and Jack being wrongly dragged into this nightmare because of Emma's spite. Word of the debacle at my son's birthday spread like wildfire. Friends, neighbors, and even distant acquaintances whispered about the scandal, turning my life into a living nightmare. Resolved to clear my name, I decided to proceed with the DNA test. I called Benjamin, my voice calm, but my hands still shaky. "I'll do the test," I declared. There was a pause before Benjamin responded, his too composed tone grating on me. "I knew you'd come around. It's for the best." At the clinic, my nerves were frayed. Benjamin was there, burdened with guilt, and to my shock, so was Jack. "Why is he here?" I demanded, unable to mask my frustration. Benjamin looked away, mumbling about the rumors involving Jack and me. The accusation stung. You think I'd be unfaithful with your brother? That's how little you trust me. Before he could respond, we were called in for the testing. The specialist explained the complexity of the situation, especially with potential fathers being siblings. We'll need additional samples from everyone, including you, Erica, to ensure accuracy. So we all gave our samples, each lost in our thoughts. Jack embarrassed, Benjamin torn, and I furious at the absurdity of the situation. After the tests, the specialist informed us it would take a couple of weeks for the results. Those weeks were excruciating. I wasn't idle, though. I made calls, reaching out to someone who might help in this delicate matter, not sure where it would lead, but willing to try anything. The wait was torture, leaving me anxious about the future for my son and me. As Benjamin, Jack, and I awaited the DNA test results, the tension in Emma's living room was almost tangible, like icy fingers tightening around my heart. My young son, sensing the brewing storm, clutched my hand, confused and anxious. Emma, ever keen to play the orchestrator of drama, dramatically sliced open the envelope with a flourish, her eyes gleaming with the hope of a scandal that would prove her right. Her anticipation turned to palpable disappointment as she peered inside. "The father is Benjamin," she declared, her voice losing its usual edge. Benjamin, who had been visibly tense, relaxed instantly, a smug smile spreading across his face. He turned to me, his arrogance returning. "Well, there you have it, no harm done, right? You can come back home now." His words sparked a fierce mix of disbelief and anger within me. I couldn't contain a bitter laugh. "Come back? After all this, you must be joking," I retorted. Benjamin was taken aback by my reaction. "But you're innocent, Erica. Isn't that what you wanted?" That's when I decided to reveal my hand. I pulled out the divorce papers I'd kept hidden, placing them on the table. The room fell silent, and Benjamin's confident expression drained away, replaced by sheer panic. "What's this? Why?" he stammered. "Divorce papers," I said, the words tasting like freedom. And then I produced the photos, clear evidence of Benjamin's infidelity, captured in vivid detail by the private investigator I'd secretly hired. Benjamin's demeanor shifted from confident to broken as he began to babble apologies, his facade crumbling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, let's talk about this." "Talk," I scoffed, my voice icy. "You dragged my name through the mud, let your mother accuse me of the worst, and all the while, you were the one cheating. There's nothing to talk about." Emma tried to intervene, her previous eagerness for drama now replaced by a desperate need to manage the fallout. "Now, dear, let's all calm down. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I snapped back. "Your son's a cheat, and you're no better for stirring up all this trouble based on lies." After presenting the proof of Benjamin's betrayal for everyone to see, the room became a battleground of broken bonds and shattered illusions. Emma, with a look of sheer disgust, couldn't tear her eyes away from the photos laid out like a damning expose on the coffee table. "I'm not just walking away, Benjamin. I'll be demanding alimony and compensation for this treachery," I declared, my voice steady but seething with anger. Benjamin's face turned pale, his earlier bravado evaporating. "You can't be serious," he stammered, looking from the photos to his mother, seeking any refuge or rescue. Emma, still trying to assert some control, retorted dismissively, "Oh, please. She was never right for you. She would have cheated on you sooner or later. You're better off without her." Her words were meant to sting, but they only solidified my resolve to leave this toxic environment behind and start anew, with my dignity intact. As the confrontation reached its peak, Jack, who had been simmering with contained anger, finally erupted. "Enough!" His voice resounded through the room, his frustration palpable. He directed a steely gaze at his mother and brother. "I'm done with all of this, with both of you. After everything you've put her through, based on nothing but your twisted suspicions, I'm out." Emma's face shifted to a mask of shock and desperation. "Jack, please don't say that. I was just trying to protect our family," she pleaded. "Protect?" Jack scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Is that what you call this? Destroying relationships, spreading lies? I can't be part of this family if this is what it stands for. I'm moving to another city, starting fresh, away from all this madness. Later, when I relayed Jack's decision and the day's events to my mother, she provided her usual steadfast support, though tinged with sadness. That's the price of Emma's folly. Her arrogance and stupidity cost her sons. Maybe now she'll realize the harm she's caused. True to his word, Jack moved away, severing ties with his family. Benjamin was left to grapple with the fallout, his relationships with his mother and brother irreparably damaged by the chasm of deceit and manipulation that had widened between them. Life after the dust settled was different. It wasn't necessarily easier, but it was clearer, as if I were seeing everything for the first time again. My mother and I had many long conversations about everything that had happened, often sitting on her old, comfy sofa with cups of tea that always seemed to go cold before we finished them. "Mom," I started one evening, the sky outside serene in contrast to the turmoil I still felt inside. "Do you think I made the right choice? With the divorce, standing up to Emma and Benjamin like that?" My mom set her tea down and turned to me, her wise eyes reflecting a lifetime of understanding. "Darling, you did what you had to do. You stood up for yourself, for your dignity. That's more important than staying in a marriage that was built on distrust." The biggest change was with Jack. Before he left the city, he called me. "I can't stay here, not after everything. I need to start fresh somewhere where every corner doesn't remind me of all this." I reassured him, "You'll always have a friend in me, Jack. You were the only one who really saw me through all this mess." He chuckled, a sound that carried the weight of our shared experiences. "And you, me. Take care of yourself, all right?" After hanging up, I felt a pang of loss, not just for the relationship I thought I had with Benjamin, but for the family dynamic I had once believed in. Time passed and life found a new rhythm. My blog gained more traction, becoming a space where I could share not just tips on fitness and health, but also personal stories of resilience and starting over. It resonated with people more than I expected. One afternoon, as I was settling into this new chapter, my phone rang unexpectedly. The caller ID displayed a name I hadn't seen in a while, Emma. My initial instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity, or perhaps a desire to finally close this chapter, compelled me to answer. "Hello." Her voice came through, shaky and tinged with what seemed like regret. "Erica, I was wondering, could I see him, my grandson?" The audacity of her request, after everything that had happened, left me momentarily speechless. Standing in my living room, the memory of Emma's hurtful accusations came flooding back as I listened to her voice on the phone. "You've got some nerve, Emma," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "After all the chaos you caused, now you want to play grandma? You didn't even want to acknowledge him before." She began to cry, her voice breaking with apologies, trying to explain herself amid sobs. But I was beyond accepting excuses. "Save your tears, Emma. It's too late for sorry now." I interrupted, my patience worn thin. "But please, I just want to make things right," she pleaded, desperation clear in her trembling words. I let out a deep, weary sigh. "You should have thought of that before," I told her. "You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it alone." Without waiting for her response, I ended the call. The click of the phone hanging up reverberated like a gavel in my mind, sealing the decision I had made. It felt harsh, perhaps, but it was necessary. A boundary had been set. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly in control of my life and my decisions. Looking at my son, now showing a maturity beyond his years, I knew we were going to be okay. We had each other, and a future that was ours alone to shape, free from the shadows of the past. Unfazed by the situation, he kindly invited me for a coffee chat at a nearby cafe. Driven by curiosity, I accepted, making it clear that I would pay. It was important to me that he knew I didn't expect anything from him. As we settled with our coffees, He began to talk, his voice tinged with a hint of regret. "I owe you an apology, Zoe," he admitted. "I was too stubborn to reconnect with your mother after she made her decisions. Now, I realize I've missed out on being part of my only granddaughter's life." As I stirred my coffee, avoiding eye contact, he continued, "So, why reach out now?" He sighed, the years visible in his gaze. "I want to make things right. I'd like to support your education if you'll allow it." His proposal took me by surprise. Attending college had always seemed like a distant dream due to financial constraints. "I need to discuss this with my mom," I replied. Later at home, I shared the encounter with my mom. She remained silent for a while, pausing from her dinner preparations. Finally, she wiped her hands on her apron, took a deep breath, and said, "Zoe, I've been angry at your grandfather for many years, but perhaps it's time to forgive. If this is what you want, I'll support you." Starting at Preston University felt like entering a new world. Armed with secondhand books and modest clothes, I felt out of place among peers who casually chatted about luxury vacations. Nervously clutching my notebook, I took a seat at the back of my first class, hoping to blend in. "Is this seat taken?" a friendly voice asked. I looked up to see a guy with a warm smile. "No, it's all yours," I responded, making room. "I'm Logan," he introduced himself, offering a handshake. "Zoe," I replied, touched by his easygoing nature. "So, Zoe, ready to conquer the world of finance?" he asked with a playful sparkle in his eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be," I managed to smile, feeling slightly more at ease. University life was a whirlwind of new concepts and intense studying. Despite feeling like an outsider, I was determined to excel. One day, after a tough lecture, I heard some classmates planning a study group. I hesitated, then asked if I could join. "Sure, but it's at the cafe on 6th. It's a bit expensive," one girl said with a dismissive look. I stiffened, aware of the financial barriers that still stood in my way. "Thanks, I'll see if I can make it," I replied, though I knew I wouldn't. Despite these challenges, I thrived academically. My hard work didn't go unnoticed. One day, Mr. Arthur, my finance professor, complimented me on my latest paper. "Zoe, your insight was impressive. Have you thought about an internship? Some firms value sharp minds like yours," he encouraged. Surprised, I confessed my doubts about lacking experience or connections. "Sometimes, talent speaks louder than connections," Mr. Arthur reassured me, inviting me to discuss further during office hours. That conversation with my professor was a pivotal moment for me. It sparked a belief that perhaps I truly had a place at the university. Energized, I began applying for internships, each application fueled by a growing hope that slowly overshadowed my initial insecurities. As the semester unfolded, I found my groove and made friends like Logan, who appreciated my sharp humor and readiness to assist with challenging assignments. One evening, while walking back to my dorm, my mom called. "How's my college girl?" she inquired, her voice always soothing my frazzled nerves. "Hey, Mom. It's tough, but I'm keeping up," I replied, a smile lighting up my face as I shared my modest triumphs. By the time I reached my senior year at Preston University, I had evolved from a shy scholarship student to the top of my class in investment analysis. As graduation neared, my grandfather, whom I hadn't spoken to much beyond brief updates and holiday greetings, invited me to a celebratory dinner. We met at an upscale restaurant, the kind with a dress code and an intimidating array of silverware. "Zoe, my dear, you've done exceptionally well," Grandpa Evan said, his eyes sparkling with pride as he hugged me.
"Thanks, Grandpa."
"I couldn't have done it without your support," I responded, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. Over dinner, he regaled me with tales from his finance days, each story imbued with wisdom and nostalgia. Then over coffee, he leaned in with a serious look. "Zoe, I've been thinking. I'd like you to consider joining my firm. You'd start in a high position, overseeing new investments. What do you say?" he proposed, searching my eyes for agreement. I paused, stirring my coffee thoughtfully. The offer was alluring, a fast track to a high-flying career. Yet, something inside me hesitated. "Grandpa, that's an amazing offer, but I think I need to make it on my own first." I want to prove to myself, and to everyone else, that I can succeed without special treatment, I explained. Grandpa Evan's smile widened. That's exactly why I'm proud of you. You have your mother's spirit, he said warmly. After graduation, job offers arrived, but not from the high-profile firms that pursued my classmates. Instead, I accepted a position at a respected, though less glamorous, investment company, a place where merit mattered more than one's background. The work was challenging, involving intricate financial models and demanding client portfolios that required precision and creativity. The steep learning curve was exhilarating, and each successful project further validated my decision to forge my own path. Months passed, and I began to establish myself. Initially skeptical, my colleagues now sought my counsel. One day, after sealing a particularly complex deal, Logan, who had joined the same firm, congratulated me. "See, I told you back in freshman year, you were going to rock the finance world," he said, grinning. As the year concluded, I felt not just accomplishment, but fulfillment. I wasn't merely surviving, I was thriving. The bridge between my past and my future was solid beneath my feet, each plank a testament to diligence and perseverance. My life, once a steep climb, now felt like an exhilarating ascent. When Vincent burst into my life, he was like a meteor, bright, dazzling, and impossible to ignore. Our paths crossed at a friend's rooftop party under a canopy of twinkling lights with a vibrant city humming beneath us. "Hey, you're blocking the view," he teased, approaching me by the railing. I turned to see a guy with a grin and eyes full of mischief. "I believe the view can be shared," I responded playfully. "That's fair," he chuckled. "I'm Vincent," he said, extending his hand. "Zoe," I replied, the handshake sparking an unexpected connection. We spent the entire evening chatting effortlessly about everything from our favorite novels to our most embarrassing childhood stories. It was easy to open up to him, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself completely letting go. When he asked me out at the end of the night, I eagerly agreed. Dating Vincent was like being swept up in a whirlwind of adventure. He was spontaneous, fun-loving, and incredibly caring. Despite his wealthy background, which we seldom discussed, he was down to earth. A few months into our relationship, he suggested I meet his parents. I felt nervous, aware that these were influential people in society. "You'll love them," Vincent reassured me as we drove to their grand mansion one evening. "They're really looking forward to meeting you." However, the reality was far less welcoming. The dinner took place in their sprawling, perfectly styled home. As we entered, I immediately sensed a change in atmosphere. His mother, a regal figure with piercing eyes, greeted us with a cool demeanor. "Mother, this is Zoe," Vincent introduced me, his smile wavering in the cool air of the opulent dining room. Zoe," his mother remarked, her tone smooth yet icy. "Vincent tells us you work in finance." "How quaint." I clenched my jaw at her patronizing tone but managed a polite smile. "Yes, I've been with Hollinger Investments for some time now." And before that, I was cut off as Vincent's father interjected, his curiosity tinged with disdain. "Vincent mentioned something about a cafe?" "Yes, I worked part-time at a local cafe during college," I replied, striving to maintain my composure despite their judgmental undertones. An awkward silence followed until his mother abruptly stood. "Well, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on the dessert." She left the room without another word. Dinner continued with strained conversation, mostly driven by Vincent in an effort to bridge the uncomfortable silence. Leaving that night, the relief was palpable. The following weeks were challenging. I encountered whispers and disparaging looks from family and friends at events. I was always seen as the outsider, the waitress turned analyst, forever defined by my past rather than my present. Then came the ultimatum. His mother invited me for tea, a meeting that turned out to be a cold, calculated confrontation. "Zoe, you're a smart girl," she began, her eyes assessing. "You and Vincent come from two different worlds. I'm prepared to offer you an incentive to end this relationship amicably." I was stunned by her audacity, momentarily speechless. "You want to pay me to leave your son?" I finally asked, disbelief mixing with rising anger. It's for the best. You'll never truly be one of us, she stated bluntly. My response was firm and resolute. Thank you for your hospitality, I said, standing up. But Vincent and I will decide what's best for us, not you. The decision to get married felt as natural as turning the next page in a book you couldn't wait to finish. Vincent and I were deeply in love, ready to begin our lives together, united by our feelings and undeterred by external pressures. Before we could set a wedding date, Vincent's mother insisted that we meet with their family lawyer to draft a prenuptial agreement. In the lawyer's lavish office, she outlined the terms with a clinical detachment that unsettled me. It's nothing personal, dear, she said, her voice smooth and emotionless. It's just our way of protecting our assets. You'll have yours, and Vincent will have his. I understand, I replied, maintaining a composure I hardly felt. I don't want anything that isn't rightfully mine. I'm marrying Vincent, not his wealth. The lawyer took diligent notes, while Vincent's mother offered a tight, almost surprised smile. Very sensible, she remarked. Despite the awkward start, Vincent and I opted for a simple wedding. No grand affair, no society pages, just us and our shared commitment. On a brisk morning, we drove to City Hall for the ceremony. Sitting in the car, waiting for our turn, Vincent grasped my hand. You sure about this? He asked softly. Doing it like this, without anyone else? I squeezed his hand, reassuring him with a smile. I've never been more sure of anything. It's about us, not them. We don't need a crowd. He nodded, though his furrowed brow betrayed his concern about his parents' reaction. My parents won't like this, he admitted. I know, I said gently, but it's not their decision. And who knows? Maybe they'll come around eventually. The ceremony was brief, yet beautiful in its simplicity. We exchanged rings in front of a small group of other couples, the only witnesses to our union. When pronounced husband and wife, the joy and relief we felt were profound. After signing the official papers, we stepped out into the sunlight, officially Mr. and Mrs. We celebrated quietly at a quaint seaside restaurant Vincent had reserved, raising our glasses to new beginnings. The backlash from his family was as expected, cold shoulders and harsh words at any family event we attended. His mother was particularly bitter. You've made your bed, now lie in it, she hissed during one tense dinner. Vincent's father was more resigned, but equally disappointed. Vincent was caught in the middle, trying to mend the growing rift between me and his parents, but each attempt seemed to only widen it. At one gathering, his mother cornered me in the kitchen, her voice a venomous whisper. You think you've won him, but you'll never really be part of this family, she warned. Facing her calmly, I replied, I don't need to win anyone. Vincent chose me, and I chose him. That's enough for me. Maybe one day it will be for you, too. She scoffed, turning away to hide a slight tremor in her hands. The conflict was far from resolved. For years into our marriage, I had made a name for myself as a talented investor. Despite my professional success, my in-laws continued to view me with suspicion, spreading rumors that I was merely spending their son's money. It stung that Vincent rarely defended me against such accusations, always rationalizing his silence by pointing to his precarious position within his father's company, which he was expected to inherit. I don't want to rock the boat, he'd say, which hurt deeply. The distance between us grew as I navigated the challenging waters of our personal and familial dynamics, striving to maintain my independence and integrity in the face of ongoing skepticism. I dedicated myself to my career and to making a meaningful impact wherever possible. My efforts led me to join a charity that supported underprivileged children, and I contributed $380,000 to their initiatives. This commitment not only fulfilled me, but also earned me an invitation to a high-profile charity dinner at an upscale hotel, a gathering spot for the city's philanthropic elite. Vincent and I arrived together, but upon entering the grand ballroom, the cold, dismissive stares of his parents were palpable. They ignored me, treating me as if I were invisible, while Vincent uncomfortably avoided discussing our strained relations. As the evening unfolded, it was time for speeches. My grandfather, a revered figure in the foundation, was the evening's guest of honor. The presenter first acknowledged my grandfather's visionary leadership and contributions. Then the focus shifted to the major donors. And we extend a special thank you to Mrs. Zoe Thompson, whose generous donation of over $380,000 has made a significant impact on our projects this year. The applause that followed was loud and heartfelt, but it was abruptly interrupted by a shrill outburst. Vincent's mother, red-faced and furious, stood up and demanded a microphone. "This is preposterous," she shouted, her voice echoing through the ballroom. "I must expose the truth." The room fell into stunned silence as she continued. "Zoe is nothing but a leech. That money isn't hers. She's using my son. She's a gold digger, and I won't let her fool anyone here." The crowd's eyes, filled with curiosity and judgment, turned towards me. My face burned with embarrassment and hurt as she hurled her accusations. I looked to Vincent for support, but, to my dismay, he hesitated, glanced at his parents, and walked towards them, leaving me isolated in the crowd. As I stood there, fists clenched and heart pounding with a mix of anger and humiliation, a sudden calm descended upon the room. My grandfather stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, may I have your attention for just one more moment," he announced, his voice commanding silence. Everyone's gaze shifted to him, filled with respect and curiosity. "Zoe, please join me up here," he said, extending a hand towards me. Nervous, but trusting him completely, I made my way to the stage, feeling every eye on me. As I reached his side, he took my hand and turned to face the audience, his presence reassuring. "I stand before you tonight not just as the chairman of this foundation, but as a grandfather." The young woman standing beside me, "Zoe, is my granddaughter, and I know her better than anyone else here," he declared, causing a collective gasp to sweep through the room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my in-laws' shocked expressions, my mother-in-law's mouth agape in disbelief. It was a dramatic revelation that none, especially them, had anticipated. "Zoe has been accused tonight of dishonesty, of being a gold digger," he continued, his tone firm yet tinged with disappointment. "Let me set the record straight. Zoe grew up in humble circumstances, yes, but she has faced more challenges by the time she was a teenager than most face in a lifetime. Zoe had transcended all obstacles through her unwavering dedication and persistent effort." The room fell into a respectful hush as everyone listened intently to his words. "I supported her education financially, but that was the extent of my assistance," he explained. "Her subsequent successes are solely attributable to her own perseverance, intelligence, and ethical standards." Turning to face me, he continued, "Zoe, your achievements are truly remarkable, and I couldn't be prouder. I want everyone here today to understand that after I'm gone, Zoe will inherit not just my wealth, but also the duty to carry forward our cherished philanthropic legacy." The applause that followed was heartfelt and loud, celebrating a man who had just publicly vindicated his granddaughter's honor with such fervor. People rose to their feet, their applause reverberating against the majestic walls, a vivid contrast to the chilly standoff that had just taken place. My mother-in-law, unable to confront the supportive crowd, quickly exited the room, closely followed by my father-in-law, both visibly embarrassed and defeated. Vincent, who had remained quiet throughout the evening, finally approached me, his face a mix of regret and confusion. He seemed about to apologize or make an excuse, but I could not face him this time. I walked past him, head held high, unwilling to pause and listen to his words. The pain was too profound, the betrayal too cutting. His actions had shown me exactly where I stood in his life. The divorce proceeded swiftly and without incident, thanks to our prenuptial agreement and the fact that we had no children. I moved into a modest rented apartment, a space that was entirely my own, free from the oppressive shadows of expectations and scorn that had loomed large in my previous residence. One day, as I sorted through some old documents, my phone rang displaying my mother-in-law's number, a reminder of a chapter one had decidedly closed. Curious yet wary, I answered. "Zoe, darling," she began, her tone unusually sweet. "I've been reflecting on everything that happened, and I think we started off on the wrong foot. Why don't you come back? You and Vincent love each other, after all." Her words felt heavy and disingenuous. It was evident that her change of heart was not driven by genuine remorse, but likely by my newly acknowledged inheritance, which had seemingly enhanced my worth in her eyes. "I think you're mistaken," I responded, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. "There's nothing left for us to discuss. Please, don't call me again." I hung up without waiting for her reply and blocked her number, a small yet significant act of setting boundaries. Months later, I learned through mutual friends that Vincent's family business had collapsed, and their unsustainable lifestyle had forced them to downsize significantly. While I took no joy in their misfortune, it served as a stark reminder of how deceptive appearances can be and how fortunes can change swiftly. A few weeks later, I visited the charity foundation my grandfather supported. As I entered, he welcomed me with open arms. "Zoe, I'm so glad you're here," he greeted. We sat in his office discussing my new apartment and job, and I realized how much I had evolved. The challenges strengthened me. "Grandpa, I think I'm ready to take on more responsibility with the foundation if you're still willing," I ventured, feeling more confident in my path. "Nothing would make me happier," he responded warmly. With my painful past behind me, I looked forward to a future filled with opportunities, ready to shape it as I deemed fit. Hello, I'm Josie, and at 33, I've spent more time with cameras than with people. Growing up in a family that owned a series of hotels and restaurants, you might expect me to continue with the family legacy. However, I chose a different path. I swapped the comforts of the family business for the unpredictability of a camera and the natural world as my backdrop. Freelance photography became my calling, capturing images for magazines and advertisements, driven by those who appreciated my unique perspective. My photography journey turned pivotal when my old, trusted camera, my companion on countless assignments, finally broke down. Instead of seeking a quick online replacement, I decided to visit a local tech store, wanting to get a feel for a new camera before making a decision. That day in the store felt routine until it didn't. As I was perusing the camera aisle, a guy around my age approached me. His demeanor was relaxed, and he lacked the aggressive pitch of a typical salesperson. "Looking for something specific?" he asked. I half-jokingly responded, "Yeah, something that won't quit on me mid-shot." He chuckled in understanding. We started talking about what I usually shoot, mostly nature scenes, but sometimes urban landscapes to keep things interesting. His name was Thomas. He guided me through the latest models, describing the specifications with the enthusiasm of someone reciting their favorite prose. Refreshingly, he never pushed the most expensive options on me. Eventually, he pointed out a sleek model that seemed just right. "Willing to take this one for a spin?" he suggested. Deciding felt surprisingly easy, and soon, Thomas was finalizing my purchase. As he handed me the bag, he casually asked for my number, just to make sure everything's working great. I saw through his subtle ploy but played along, joking that any spam text would cost him a coffee. True to his word, Thomas did call, but not about the camera. Instead, he asked me out. I accepted, thinking why not? Life is short after all. From our first meeting at the camera store to countless adventures thereafter, Thomas and I became inseparable. We shared many moments, him with his quirky tech knowledge, and me capturing the city through my lens. About 8 months later, Thomas excitedly proposed a weekend getaway. Despite my teasing threat of a survival camp leading to him sleeping on the couch, I eagerly packed. He picked me up in his beloved but rickety old Jeep, and we drove off, the playlist setting the mood as we both got lost in anticipation. He had booked us a quaint cabin by a lake, not fancy, but perfect for us. That night, as we sat by the fire roasting marshmallows, the simplicity of the setting perfect for golden brown treats, I could sense he had something important to say. Thomas fumbled with his words, a stick poking at the fire, trying to articulate his feelings. As I sat by the crackling campfire, munching on a marshmallow, Thomas got a thoughtful look in his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, causing me to raise an eyebrow in mock alarm. "Thinking can be dangerous, you know," I teased. Thomas chuckled, took a deep breath, and turned to face me, the firelight casting shadows across his features. "I love this, you know, us. And I'm hoping you feel the same way," he confessed, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Leaning in, I nudged his shoulder lightly. "Yeah, I kinda do," I admitted with a smile. Suddenly, Thomas fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening. He went silent, looking both serious and slightly terrified. "Marry me, Josie." "For real," he blurted out as he opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. It was so unexpected that I burst out laughing. It was either that or burst into tears. "Thomas, this is possibly the worst proposal ever." "Of course I will," I replied, still laughing. Relief washed over him, and he grinned. "Damn, I thought I'd need to convince you more," he said. "Just promise me no more surprises like this without a warning," I teased. "No promises," he replied playfully, slipping the ring onto my finger. We spent the rest of the evening just sitting by the dying fire, talking about what this step meant for us. No grand dreams, just real stuff like whether we should get a new couch or if his Jeep could survive another winter. The next day was spent lazily by the lake, skipping stones and discussing how to break the news to our families. Thomas was a bit estranged from his folks, who were always focused on money and prestige. He warned me that they might not take well to me, not seeing me as worthy in their eyes. "Let them talk," I said, tossing a stone across the water. "We know what we have, and that's enough." Thomas nodded, watching the ripples. "Yeah, it's us against the world, huh?" "Always," I confirmed, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but feeling it would definitely be worth it. Little did I know just how challenging things would get with his family. A few weeks later, when it was time to meet Thomas's infamous in-laws, we drove to their house on a Sunday. I was a bundle of nerves, fussing over my appearance, eager to make a good impression. The moment we stepped through the door, it was like walking into a chill. Thomas's mom scrutinized me as if inspecting something unsavory, and his dad wasn't much warmer, giving us a skeptical look. "So, Josie, was it?" his mom began, without even a smile. "Who do you work for? What's your salary like?" Her blunt questions caught me off guard. "I'm a freelance photographer," I explained. "I work for myself, so my income varies." At that, Thomas's sister, who had been idly scrolling on her phone, looked up and snorted. "Freelance? That sounds like a fancy word for being jobless. Thomas could have picked anyone, and he ends up with a beggar from an alley?" Their laughter stung, and I felt a flush of embarrassment heat my cheeks. Thomas's hand found mine, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Hey, that's enough," he snapped, his voice more forceful than I'd ever heard it. "I love her, and she's brilliant at what she does. That's all you need to know." His mom rolled her eyes but dropped the subject. Dinner was a tense affair, with me attempting to make polite conversation while dodging snide remarks about my little hobby. It was a relief to finally say our goodbyes after that disaster. It was then my turn to introduce Thomas to my parents. We met them at a cozy little cafe downtown, a stark contrast to the tension at his family's place. My parents were all smiles, welcoming Thomas with open arms, ready to embrace him into our family without hesitation. When we walked into the cafe, my parents immediately wrapped us in warm hugs. "Thomas, we've heard so much about you," my mom exclaimed, guiding him to a table by the window. My dad, his eyes twinkling, joined in with a hearty handshake. "We're just ordinary pensioners now," he said modestly. "Used to run a little shop back in the day, nothing too grand," he added, winking at me. A silent promise to keep our family's financial success our little secret for now. Thomas, looking visibly more relaxed than he had in days, was encouraged by my mom to share his story. "Josie's told us bits and pieces, but we'd love to hear more from you," she said warmly. As he opened up about his battles with his family's high expectations and his aspirations to start his own tech company, my parents listened attentively, interjecting with thoughtful questions. Over coffee, I realized how starkly different this meeting was from the chilly reception at his family's house. Here, there was no judgment or intrusive probing into our finances, just sincere interest and acceptance. It felt like a soothing balm after the earlier unpleasantness. As we left the cafe, Thomas squeezed my hand. "Your folks are amazing, Josie." "Thanks for that, I needed it," he said gratefully. I smiled, feeling heartened by his words and my parents' easy acceptance. "They love you already, you know," I reassured him. Thomas and I envisioned a simple wedding. Nothing grand, just close friends, a little chapel, and good food. But predictably, his family had other ideas. His sister scoffed at our plans during a family dinner, jeering, "A modest wedding? More like a beggar's bash," and provoked laughter from everyone except Thomas. His mother chimed in with a snide remark about how it seemed we couldn't afford anything better. Trying to maintain my composure, I explained, "It's our wedding. We want it to be intimate and personal." Thomas supported me firmly. "Josie's right. It's our day, our way." The wedding day itself was everything we had hoped for, simple, meaningful, and beautiful. However, true to form, Thomas's mom and sister barely concealed their disdain, sitting aloof and sour-faced, not mingling with my family and responding to friendly overtures with cold stares. After the ceremony, when Thomas and I moved into my apartment, the real challenges began. His mom and sister started dropping by unannounced, often around mealtime. They'd sit at my table, eating the food I'd prepared while making snide remarks. "So, Josie, still snapping pictures for pennies?" his sister would ask with a smirk. I kept my response light yet firm. "Photography can be quite lucrative, you know." They would exchange skeptical looks, clearly not convinced. One afternoon, while supposedly job hunting, his sister bluntly asked, "Come on, how much do you make?" Before I could respond, Thomas intervened, his voice tight with irritation. "That's none of your business. Josie isn't living off me. We're partners." Despite this, their visits became more frequent, and his sister's requests more audacious. She would blatantly ask Thomas to transfer money so she could go out with her friends, loud enough for me to overhear. Sometimes Thomas would relent and send her money. Other times, he'd refuse, standing firm against her intrusions. After yet another of her tantrums about money, Ashley stormed out of our apartment. Once the door slammed shut, I turned to Thomas with a serious look. "We need to set some boundaries. This can't go on," I said firmly. Thomas sighed deeply, rubbing his temples in frustration. "I know, Josie. I'm sorry. It's just family stuff is hard, you know?" Tensions between Thomas and his family had been escalating for a while, and everything came to a head during a Sunday dinner at his mother's house. It was Ashley's birthday dinner in a couple of months, and she had already set her heart on a lavish gift. As soon as we walked through the door, she wasted no time diving into her wish list. "Thomas, you know what I want for my birthday, right? That designer bag I showed you last week. It's just over $1,000. Thomas frowned, his jaw clenching in that way that signaled he was about to assert himself. "Ashley, we've talked about this. I can't be dropping that kind of money anymore. I'm married now, and we have our expenses." Ashley's face contorted as if she had bitten into a sour lemon. "Oh, come on, Thomas. Since when do you back down from spoiling your little sis? What? Has Josie got you on a leash now?" The room fell silent, the tension palpable. You could have heard a pin drop. I felt every eye on me, especially the burning glare from his mother. Thomas shook his head and reached over to squeeze my hand under the table for support. "No, Ashley, I'm sorry, but we've made a budget and we're sticking to it." That set Ashley off. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back with a loud scrape that made me jump. "This is all your fault," she shrieked at me. "You're just sucking him dry, taking all his money and attention. He used to have enough for me before you." I tried to maintain a calm tone. "Ashley, I haven't asked Thomas to stop helping you. We're just being responsible." That's when his mom chimed in, siding with Ashley as always. "Thomas, she's your sister. You can't let her down. What kind of brother are you if you can't help her out?" Thomas had enough. He stood up, pulling me up with him. Enough. We're leaving. I'm not going to justify our personal decisions here. We left amidst Ashley's cries and his mom's accusing eyes. It was the last straw. We decided then and there to cut off communication for a while. We needed peace, a break from the drama. So, we packed up a few days later and went on a small trip, just the two of us, to clear our heads. Returning from that trip felt like a breath of fresh air. However, we soon discovered that Ashley hadn't given up. She broke into our apartment while we were still unloading our car. You think you can just go off on vacations with my brother's money while I get nothing? Ashley was in my face the second I walked in, her voice so loud it echoed off the walls. What are you talking about, Ashley? I use my own money for our trips, I said, struggling to keep my composure. But seeing her rifling through my closet, throwing my clothes around, made my blood boil. Lies. All this, she waved dismissively at my belongings scattered on the floor, bought with Thomas's money, right? Living the high life while I get scraps. Before I could intervene, she grabbed my new camera from the desk and hurled it to the floor. The crash felt like a physical blow. That's enough. I screamed, my patience snapping. Get out of our apartment now. When Thomas came back and saw the mess and the broken camera, he was furious. He immediately called Ashley, his voice filled with anger, demanding she stay away and respect our boundaries. Amidst the chaos of trying to salvage what was left of my equipment, she abruptly ended her call, lobbing sharp insults before disconnecting. Thomas turned to me, his demeanor softening. I'm terribly sorry, Josie. I'll make sure you get a new camera. We'll resolve this, don't worry. His reassurance barely registered as I nodded, my emotions too stirred to form words. Together, we began to clean up, enveloped in a heavy silence that bore the weight of our mutual resolve not to let his family's antics tear us apart again. Weeks later, after the incident with the camera, Thomas received a surprisingly cheerful call from his sister Ashley. She was excited to announce her birthday and, unexpectedly, her engagement. They were planning a celebration at Regal Terrace, the city's most prestigious restaurant. Normally, the mere mention of such a pretentious place would make me scoff, but this time, I found myself smiling at the news. Thomas noticed and looked confused. I thought you'd want to avoid anything to do with Ashley after the mess, he remarked, a hint of hesitation in his voice. Leaning closer, I whispered, trust me, this is one event we shouldn't miss. There's a reason for it. He studied my expression for a moment before nodding in agreement. Okay, if you think it's best. On the evening of the dinner, we dressed in our finest, Thomas in a dashing suit and myself in a chic, black dress. As we approached the reserved area, I could see the entire family assembled around a large table, including Thomas's parents and Ashley's new fiancé, a man with a smirk that seemed too practiced. Ashley waved us over, her grin wide, but not quite reaching her eyes. Look who's here. Join us to celebrate my big day. As we drew closer, it became apparent that there was one chair too few. Ashley's eyes glinted with mischief as she observed our approach. Thomas's mother quickly noted our pause and said snidely, it looks like we're short one chair. This table is for family. And Josie, you might as well stand or find a spot at the bar, Ashley added, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. The relatives murmured among themselves, some smirking, others shifting awkwardly. Thomas, visibly angry and clenching his fists, turned to me. We should leave. We don't need this. However, I gently stopped him. No, let's stay. It's important. Confused but trusting, he stayed by my side. As the tension mounted, the restaurant manager approached us, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, but it's a full house tonight. I can't offer you an extra chair at the moment, he explained, his eyes flicking between the smug faces at the table and us. Just as Ashley and her mother's grins widened, thinking they had bested us, the manager's tone changed as he addressed me. However, we do have a special VIP table reserved for the daughter of the owner of Regal Terrace. Miss Josie, your table is ready. The table fell utterly silent, forks suspended in the air, as shock washed over Ashley and her mother's faces. Thomas turned to me in disbelief. Your dad owns this place? I nodded with a slight smile. I wanted you to know me for who I am, not because of my connections, I admitted, gesturing around the luxurious setting. He laughed, shaking his head. You're full of surprises. Good thing you didn't tell me sooner, or I'd be swamped with favors to ask. We both chuckled, the earlier tension dissolving as we followed the manager to our secluded VIP table with a spectacular view over the city. The murmurs from Thomas's family turned to whispers of astonishment, their previous confidence replaced by a stunned silence. Just as we had settled into the luxurious comfort of our secluded VIP table, enjoying the enhanced flavor of champagne, about 20 minutes later, a contrite Ashley and her equally remorseful mother approached us. Their earlier confidence had melted away, replaced by visible discomfort. Josie, we didn't quite anticipate this, but we went a bit overboard with our orders, Ashley stuttered, avoiding my gaze. The bill is more than we expected. Could you, since your family, I raised an eyebrow, cutting her off mid-sentence. Oh, but I thought you mentioned earlier that I wasn't family, I reminded her calmly, ensuring my point was felt. Her mother joined in, her voice tinged with desperation. Josie, please, we just didn't know. Help us out here. Thomas squeezed my hand under the table, a silent gesture of support. I surveyed their anxious expressions and then glanced at Thomas, who gave a subtle nod. I think it's best if you handle your own bill tonight, I responded firmly. After all, it's important to live within one's means. Wouldn't you agree? Ashley's face dropped, and her mother's expression tightened. They turned and walked away, heading back to their table to face the consequences of their extravagance. After our encounter at Regal Terrace, life settled into a new rhythm for Thomas and me. His family, previously sharp and distant, abruptly changed their tune, showering us with compliments and invitations as if they had always adored me. It felt like watching bad actors in a poorly scripted play. We chose to keep our distance, preferring the peace of our little world. Things became even more interesting when we learned through the grapevine that Ashley's fiancé had broken off their engagement shortly after the dinner debacle. Can't tie myself to that kind of drama, he reportedly said. I couldn't blame him. Thomas and I were enjoying a perfect afternoon at my parents' house, lounging on the terrace with the city spread peacefully below, sipping tea as the sunset painted the sky. They're trying, huh? Thomas noted, nodding towards his phone, which had been buzzing with texts from his mom. I chuckled, rolling my eyes. Trying too hard. It's almost embarrassing. But I'm more interested in what's happening with you and my dad. Thomas's face brightened, a familiar spark igniting as he discussed his passions. Your dad's incredible, you know? He offered to fund my startup. He's been looking for a new venture and thinks my tech idea has potential. My mom, joining us with a fresh pot of tea, smiled knowingly. We've always believed in supporting dreams, and we believe in you, Thomas. He reached over, squeezing her hand gratefully. Thank you. That means more than I can say. The conversation then shifted to future plans, dreams of a tech company that could change our small corner of the world, and eventually to the family Thomas and I hope to start soon. Do you think you're ready for the whole parenting adventure? My dad asked, a twinkle in his eye. Thomas laughed, a sound rich with warmth and anticipation. With Josie, I'd be ready for anything. And so, our days were filled with planning and dreaming. Thomas began laying the groundwork for his business, fueled by my dad's support and the freedom of no longer hiding who we were. As for me, I relished the unfolding of our new life together, full of promise and newfound alliances. As I continued to explore the world through my camera lens, I began to envision a future that might soon include a little one tugging at my skirt, eager to see the world as mommy sees it. One serene evening, while Thomas and I relaxed on our couch with the city lights flickering like distant promises outside our window, I decided to address the thoughts swirling in my mind. Thomas, do you ever think about how wild it is, the way everything turned out? I asked, tucking my feet under his legs for warmth. He chuckled softly, pulling me closer, his arms a comforting presence. Every day, but I wouldn't change a thing. Not really. Not even your sister's drama. I teased, nudging him playfully. Well, maybe that, he admitted with a grin. But it all led us to this moment, right? We spent the remainder of the evening sharing our dreams and ideas aloud, talking about potential nursery themes and the kind of parents we hope to become. It all felt incredibly real, a future that was uniquely ours, just starting to take shape. As we eventually made our way to bed, the last thing I saw was the ring on my finger, glinting softly in the low light, a solid symbol of our shared experiences and the future we were stepping into together. As I drifted into sleep, a thought crossed my mind. This is the essence of true happiness. Was my family joking? I couldn't believe the small amount they mentioned. Just the other day, my phone was buzzing nonstop with calls from my parents. When I finally answered, they started shouting before I could even speak. At first, I couldn't grasp what my dad was saying, leaving me totally confused. Later, I found out they were furious over the money I was supposedly sending. My sister Mira, they claimed, sent them as much as $12,000 each month, while they thought I only contributed a meager 80 cents. But that wasn't true. I had been sending $12,000 every month, just like Mira. You must be lying, they insisted. Mira, with her modeling career, makes more than you. She sends us $12,000 a month. We are so disappointed in you. Mira is so thoughtful, my father grumbled, clearly upset. My mom joined in too, criticizing my lifestyle. Do you think it's okay to just live on your own, splurging your money? Why can't you be more like your sister? She cares about us so much, she sighed heavily. I've always felt that they favored Mira. She was stunning, turning heads wherever she went, while I was often overlooked. People always compared us, praising her beauty and joking about how plain I looked next to her. From a young age, it was clear to everyone that Mira was destined for success in acting or modeling. My parents doted on her, always making sure she had the newest, trendiest clothes and enrolling her in any class she wanted. Meanwhile, I made do with hand-me-downs and no classes at all. Mira grew up spoiled and entitled, believing that what was mine was also hers. She'd take my things without asking, and when I protested, my parents would just tell me, "Let it go, Amanda. She's younger. Be a good older sister." They dismissed my feelings so easily, always siding with her. Over the years, this favoritism only got worse. In elementary school, when Mira decided she wanted her room, my parents didn't hesitate to displace me. They moved me to the living room, justifying it by saying I didn't have many belongings and there was enough space for me to sleep. The living room, where I slept among old family portraits, was my new bedroom. Feeling overlooked and undervalued, I eventually decided to stop sending money home, hoping to make a point. I'm Amanda, a 31-year-old working at a food processing company, living with the weight of being the less favored child, while my stunning sister Mira, 6 years my junior, enjoyed the limelight and affection that I never felt from our parents. Despite the cold treatment and harsh comparisons, I carried on, holding on to the memory of my grandparents who had always cherished me dearly. Growing up, my name, Amanda, was chosen by my grandfather during the vibrant spring season when amandis were blooming. He adored these flowers, and their resilience resonated with him. As a child, I loved sitting on his lap, enveloped in his warmth and listening to his comforting words. "Amanda," he would say, "no matter how tough things get, you can always push through. After the hardships, happiness will bloom again, just like amandis in spring." These words from my grandfather came back to me often, especially during difficult times. As I grew older, it became evident that my parents treated me and my sister, Mira, very differently. I never really felt at home in my own house. When I expressed my dream of becoming a school nurse and wanted to discuss university entrance exams, my parents immediately dismissed the idea. "We can't afford university fees for you. Think about your sister, Mira. We need to save for her future," they insisted, though financially, we were an average family, not struggling by any means. My dreams were pushed aside to prioritize Myra's aspirations. After high school, while Mira went off to a prestigious university, I entered the workforce, landing a job at a small to medium-sized company a few train stops away from her home. Eventually, I moved out and rented a small studio apartment near work. It was a relief to be on my own, away from the constant comparisons and favoritism at home. Mira, meanwhile, flourished at university and was soon scouted by a talent agency during a shopping trip with friends. My parents were over the moon, constantly talking about her modeling career. One day, Mira called me, her voice full of excitement and gratitude. "We owe everything to Mom and Dad," she said. "Let's start giving them $12,000 each month to show our appreciation." The amount shocked me. $12,000 was a lot of money, and while modeling might pay well, I was only making about $6,000 a month at my job. If I agreed, I'd have to cut my expenses drastically, and even then, I'd need to find extra income. Reluctantly, I decided to take on weekend work as a security guard at a construction site. The job paid well, but was physically grueling. Summers were scorching, and winters bitterly cold. Many times, I thought about quitting. Despite the difficulties, I continued, driven by a mix of family loyalty and the desire to not feel lesser than my sister. Deep down, I clung to my grandfather's words, hoping that after these hard times, happiness would once again bloom for me, just like the Amandus of spring. Despite the challenges of balancing a demanding job and certification studies with little sleep, my coworkers showed unexpected kindness. They often bought me drinks and food, realizing the effort I was putting in. I was doing everything I could to save money, cutting back on eating out and other unnecessary expenses, but reaching the monthly $12,000 I promised to send home was still a stretch. Determined to boost my income, I decided to earn a professional certification. I dedicated every spare moment to studying, the days blurring into a fast-paced mix of work and learning. In this hectic schedule, I missed several calls from my parents. When I finally had a moment to call them back, I was met with immediate anger. "You are horrible. What do you think of us?" my father yelled as soon as I answered, with my mother's voice echoing in agreement in the background. Confused, I asked, "What's wrong? Are you talking about the money I send?" I couldn't understand their anger. "Do you know how much Mira is sending? $12,000, and you send just 80 cents. Are you mocking us?" my father accused. "That's impossible. I am sending $12,000 monthly," I replied firmly, shocked by their claims. "Don't lie. Mira earns more than you from her modeling, so she's the one sending us $12,000 each month. I'm really disappointed in you." "Mira is so smart," my father continued, his tone full of disappointment. My mother chimed in, criticizing my lifestyle and accusing me of not caring about the family as much as Mira did. I was dumbfounded and overwhelmed by sadness, unable to articulate a response. It then dawned on me that there had been a huge misunderstanding. Previously, Mira had suggested we keep our contributions anonymous under the pseudonym Rainbow. At the time, I didn't realize Myra's stage name was Rain, and it turned out the transactions of 80 cents were mistakenly recorded under my name, Amanda, while Mira was credited with the $12,000 contributions. Before I could explain the mix-up, my parents declared they didn't need my mocking 80 cents and hung up. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal towards Mira for not clarifying our arrangement, which left me sleepless and filled with turmoil. Unsure whether to continue sending money, I decided to seek advice from my high school friend, Scarlett, who worked at a consulting firm. Scarlett was known for her capability and reliability, and she always gave frank, just advice. Scarlett was surprised when I requested a sudden meeting. "What happened?" she asked, noticing my distressed expression as we met for lunch. I opened up about the family situation, explaining the misunderstanding about the money. After hearing my story, Scarlett responded thoughtfully, "Are your parents struggling financially? Aren't they still in their 80s? She was also stunned by the $12,000 amount and mentioned, "It seems like they have debts. It's money spent on us." As we continued to talk, Scarlett helped me consider different perspectives and possibilities, offering me a valuable outside viewpoint on an emotionally charged situation. When my sister Mira first suggested that we send money to our parents as a token of our gratitude, I discussed it with my friend Scarlett over lunch. Scarlett looked surprised and offered a comforting perspective. You say it's money spent on both of you, but you didn't even go to university, right? Isn't it mostly on Mira? And your dad is still working too. There's no need to send $12,000 a month. It's unimaginable that they suddenly need that much money when they've been living just fine so far. Her words made sense, especially when she pointed out that if my parents thought my contribution was just 80 cents, perhaps I should take their hint and stop the payments. You're too kind, Amanda. You shouldn't let yourself be pushed around, Scarlett advised. Her words struck a chord with me, and I resolved not to be swayed so easily by family pressure. 3 months later, my phone rang incessantly one morning. It was Mira, clearly angry. Why haven't you been answering your phone all morning? And why did you stop sending money on your own? What were you thinking? She demanded, her frustration evident. Overwhelmed by my own life challenges and financial struggles, I felt the weight of her accusations. I had learned from Scarlett that Myra's so-called financial contributions were more about maintaining her pride and our parents' extravagant habits rather than necessity. Scarlett, who was also an acquaintance of a friend of Myra's, had been discreetly gathering information for me. She discovered that Mira frequently splurged on clothes and cosmetics, complaining to her friends, "My big sister is my source of funds, so I rely on her money." Lately, I've been struggling because I don't have money for my sister. I might have to cut back on facials and cosmetics for a while. It also came to light that my mother was indulging in luxury brands, and my father was not working but gambling. Supporting their wasteful lifestyles with my hard-earned money felt absurd. Do you think I don't know Dad is working, so my money isn't needed, right? I confronted them. A week later, my parents approached me after the $12,000 monthly payments had stopped. They had finally talked to Mira, who, through tears, admitted that she hadn't been making nearly as much as she claimed and that she was a burden on her modeling agency. Despite her cute appearance, she lacked talent in singing or dancing, which hindered her success in the entertainment industry. Her modeling gigs were sporadic and low-paying, often for inexpensive online catalogs. The truth of her situation led to a sharp turn in my parents' attitudes. "We've been strict with Mira. You don't worry and continue sending money as before," they said, unapologetically demanding the 3 months of payments I had withheld. Their audacity astounded me. They even added, "We've prepared for 3 months, so please deposit it when you can. You are reliable after all." Their unrelenting greed prompted me to question them further about their financial status, something that had been nagging at me. I heard from Mira that there was some debt. "Is that true?" I inquired, seeking clarity on the family's financial matters. "Debt? There's no way. We covered the tuition with your grandparents' inheritance," they responded dismissively. This conversation revealed the deep discrepancies between what I was led to believe and the reality of my family's financial and moral landscape. It became clear that I needed to make decisions based not just on familial obligation but on a fair assessment of the actual needs and the truth behind the requests for money. My father stated confidently that Myra's claims about our parents having debt were simply untrue. "We just need a bit more for shopping," my mother added casually, since they believed my father's salary was sufficient. It was evident that they were managing fine financially without needing any contribution from me. "Why does Amira get a full-time job then?" I questioned, feeling increasingly frustrated with the situation. My father sharply retorted, "Is that how you speak to your own parents? I didn't raise a daughter to act like this." My mother echoed his sentiment. "We don't need a daughter like you if you're going to be like that." Then, they threatened to use the savings that my grandfather had left specifically for me, saying, "We'll just use your grandfather's savings for you. You're no longer part of this family." They expressed their willingness to cut ties over this, which left me deeply shocked and hurt. After they left, I broke down, feeling utterly disposable and questioning my value to my own family. 3 months of silence passed before my doorbell unexpectedly rang. Standing there were my parents and Mira. I hesitated but opened the door, puzzled by their worn and tired appearances, which contrasted sharply with my improved situation. Since they last saw me, I have been working hard, studying diligently to obtain a small business consultant certification, which significantly boosted my salary. Scarlett had helped me land a new job where I was now a team leader, enjoying a fulfilling work life, and even considering moving closer to work to a better apartment. What's with the luxury? My parents and Mira asked almost accusatorially, noticing my nicer clothes and healthier appearance. Before you indulge in such luxuries, give us some money, they demanded, pleading for financial help as if entitled to it. They seemed desperate, yet unapologetic about their direct demands. Disgusted with their attitude, I confronted them. With Dad's and Myra's income, you can live comfortably. What's really going on? I challenged. Mira, tears welling up, revealed her ongoing struggles in the modeling industry, which were far harsher than she had let on. She had been scouted by another agency and decided to invest a significant sum to join, believing it would kickstart her acting career. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a scam, and the agency vanished with their money, leaving no traces behind. At that moment, someone from a consumer finance company appeared at my door, asking if I was related to them as they had traced my address. It turned out my family had borrowed a large sum, hoping Myra's career would turn around quickly. Furthermore, Mira had been spending lavishly at nightclubs to relieve stress, worsening their financial woes. I was astounded by their reckless behavior and irresponsibility. When the finance agent asked if I was family, I firmly stated, I don't know these people at all. I have nothing to do with them. It was a harsh response, but necessary to protect myself from the consequences of their actions. This moment marked a definitive break, not just emotionally but legally, from the destructive patterns of my family. After the tumultuous events, my parents found themselves filing for bankruptcy. Their debts were wiped clean, but as a consequence, they had to sell our family home and move into a modest apartment. Despite everything, both of them managed to find jobs through a temp agency and were making ends meet. Ironically, my father ended up working at the construction site where I had previously worked part-time. On his first day, he was greeted with, "Ah, it's the old man. Help me out here. There used to be a young lady here before, but she quit. She worked hard, sending money to her parents. I'd love to see the faces of parents who'd make their daughter work here." My father's expression hardened upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Mira, having abandoned her modeling aspirations, tried her luck in the nightlife scene. Unfortunately, her self-centered traits didn't sit well with customers, and she was quickly dismissed from various clubs and lounges, eventually scraping by with earnings from a small bar. Her lifestyle led to noticeable changes in her appearance, and among the regulars, tales of her modeling days seemed like distant, almost unbelievable memories. A model? Who are you kidding? Look in the mirror, they would mock. As for me, I severed ties with my family and focused on building my own life. 6 years later, I found myself at Scarlett's wedding, held in a scenic chapel in Tampa, USA, overlooking the sea. The vast blue stretched before us, and the atmosphere was charged with a sense of new beginnings. Next to Scarlett stood her husband, beaming with pride. Scarlett, who had been focusing on her career, had unexpectedly fallen in love with a colleague. During the wedding, she leaned over to me and said with a radiant smile, "Amanda, you should also face your feelings. I achieve everything I want on my own and quickly discard what I don't need." Her husband chimed in jokingly, "Don't throw me away, okay?" Scarlett's wedding was a celebration of freedom, the freedom she helped me find. I expressed my heartfelt gratitude. "Scarlett, be happy. I'm really grateful to you." It was a joyous occasion, and as the festivities drew to a close, Scarlett introduced me to a friend of theirs, Ethan, or Ethan as he was known. Tall, well-built, with a charming smile, he ran an architectural firm. "I wanted to introduce Ethan to you, Amanda. Your personalities are almost the same," Scarlett joked, sparking laughter among us. Ethan and I connected instantly and decided to grab a meal together. As we talked and laughed, I felt a sense of hope and excitement bloom within me, much like the Amandus my grandfather so loved. Moving forward, I plan to embrace both work and love, determined to live life to its fullest. "Grandpa, please keep watching over me from above. I'll make sure to blossom fully," I whispered to myself, a smile spreading across my face as I looked forward to the future. Growing up, I lived in a cozy, rented apartment that brimmed with love, largely thanks to my father, Levi. His smile could light up any room, and he had a knack for turning ordinary days into cherished adventures. Even our small balcony was transformed into a magical garden, and our living room could become a grand fort during the rainy weekends. I'm Grace, and those early years of my life were wonderfully simple and joyful. My mom, Sophie, was the quieter one, often lost in thoughts of a more luxurious life and a spacious house. Despite their contrasting dreams, my parents complemented each other well, creating a balanced home where I felt secure and loved. On many weekends, I would stay with my grandpa Ethan. He lived in a large, old Victorian house that seemed like a castle to my young eyes, with its creaking floors and mysterious nooks. These visits were special not just because I loved the house, but because they allowed my mom and dad some time alone, something Grandpa Ethan pointed out with a smile. Grandpa was wise and warm. He had been a bank manager before retirement, and he taught me valuable lessons about money management and life. Over pancakes that he claimed were the best in the world, he once shared that, though my mom dreamt of living in a grand house like his, what truly mattered was having a home filled with love. I understood even then, feeling lucky to have such warmth in our little apartment. Our life took an unexpected turn when I was 14. My dad began to lose weight rapidly. He tried to brush it off with jokes about getting fit, but his eyes betrayed his true concern. The frequent doctor visits and my mom's growing anxiety painted a grim picture. Despite his reassurances, the reality was harsh. My vibrant, energetic dad was succumbing to aggressive pancreatic cancer. In the months that followed, I watched my father diminish to a mere shadow of his former self. The disease was relentless. During his last days in the hospital, he could barely hold my hand, but he made me promise to look after Mom and to let Grandpa guide me, trusting his wisdom over anyone else's. The year after my dad passed away was like moving through a fog. Mom sank into a deep depression, barely able to interact with me, perhaps because I reminded her so much of him. Thankfully, Grandpa Ethan stood by me, becoming both a guardian and a sturdy anchor in the turbulent storm our lives had become. Eventually, living with Grandpa didn't just feel like a temporary arrangement. It became my new reality. I moved into what had been my dad's old room, surrounded by his childhood memorabilia. Grandpa helped me keep up with school, supported me through my grief, and tried his best to mend the gap left by both of my parents, one gone and the other lost to sorrow. Mom still called sometimes, her voice a whisper of her former self, reminding me of the vibrant life we once shared. But with each day at Grandpa's side, I learned to navigate my new life, carrying forward the lessons of love, resilience, and hope that my father and grandfather had instilled in me. My mother's voice had grown distant over time, her visits fleeting and filled with hurried glances that barely met mine. I had learned to expect little, but one sunny Saturday morning, a year and 3 months after Dad's passing, everything took an unexpected turn. Mom appeared at Grandpa Ethan's doorstep, her sorrowful widow's attire replaced by a bright yellow dress and a fresh, lively haircut. Her presence was almost unrecognizable as she excitedly declared, "Grace, sweetie, pack your things. You're coming home with me today." She bounced with an energy that reminded me of a carefree teenager. Both Grandpa and I were taken aback by her sudden transformation. The car ride back to our old apartment was filled with Mom's lighthearted banter, covering every trivial topic under the sun. It felt surreal, like I was next to a stranger who just happened to look like the mother I remembered. The biggest shock awaited at our apartment. Standing awkwardly in our living room were a tall man and a young girl, about 4 years my junior. "Grace, meet James and his daughter Hannah. James is my fiancé, and Hannah will be your new sister. We're getting married soon," Mom announced with a beaming smile as she clung to James's arm. The room seemed to spin around me. "When did all this happen?" I managed to ask, dazed. "Oh, we've been seeing each other for a while," Mom replied nonchalantly, waving off the importance of secrecy. "I didn't tell anyone because, people can be so jealous and judgmental. It was better this way." I retreated to my room, which I discovered had been redecorated without my knowledge. Shaking, I dialed Grandpa's number, who picked up immediately. "Grandpa, Mom has a fiancé. She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here and his daughter," I whispered into the phone, my voice a mix of disbelief and hurt. Within 15 minutes, Grandpa was at our door. From my room, I could hear their conversation. "Sophie, how could you do this without telling anyone, without even telling your daughter?" Grandpa confronted her. "I'm happy for the first time in forever," Mom retorted defensively. "I've decided to start fresh, to live again. Levi would have wanted that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression." There was a heavy pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice laden with resignation. "I hope you'll be happy, Sophie. Just don't forget you have a daughter who needs you, too." The 4 months leading up to the wedding felt like I was caught in a bizarre, alternate reality. Our small apartment now felt more cramped with 5 people. The hardest part was witnessing how quickly Hannah, my soon-to-be stepsister, became the center of Mom's world. "Mom, can you help me with my hair?" Hannah would ask, and Mom would immediately leap to assist, abandoning our conversations. Hannah calling her mom made my skin crawl. She had only known her for a few months, yet she received all the attention and privileges I had longed for but never received. When Hannah expressed interest in ballet, Mom didn't hesitate to enroll her in private lessons, a stark contrast to the years I'd been told we couldn't afford them for me. Any complaint from Hannah about her old phone being too slow was quickly remedied with a new iPhone. Whenever I tried to address the obvious favoritism, Mom would simply say, "Your sister needs to feel welcome here," ignoring the growing disparity between her treatment of us. Each time, it stung a little more, and each time, I corrected her silently. "Stepsister." Feeling overlooked was becoming all too familiar, and any attempts I made to express my need for belonging were met with indifference from my mother. She would simply shake her head and walk away, leaving me to grapple with the growing distance between us. The wedding day was a modest affair held at a local venue, yet it sparkled with my mother's joy. Dressed as a bridesmaid, I watched from the sidelines as she doted on Hannah, perfecting her hair and makeup, while I lingered in the background, barely noticing. Throughout the ceremony and reception, my mom clung to Hannah, proudly introducing her to guests as her beautiful daughter. I felt more like part of the staff than a member of the family. The generous wedding gift from Grandpa, a check for $6,000, should have been a highlight, but even this sparked a tense moment. I overheard a confrontation by the restrooms where my mom, slightly flushed from champagne and visibly upset, reproached Grandpa. "Really, Dad? A check," she hissed. "I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 5 people." Grandpa's calm demeanor hid his disappointment. "Sophie, you're rushing things, first the sudden engagement and now this. That house isn't just a piece of property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Grace spends half her time now." "Oh, so you're playing favorites now?" Mom retorted. "No, I'm being practical, and maybe you should be, too," Grandpa replied. I slipped away before they noticed me, but the conversation haunted me. My mother had transformed, becoming a stranger, prioritizing her new, perfect family, with Hannah as the star and James as the ideal husband. It felt like there was no room left for me. In response, I withdrew further, spending more and more time at Grandpa's house. At least there, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about feeling replaced. As time passed and I approached high school graduation, the apartment became a place of silent endurance, where I learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, spending my time either secluded in my room or at Grandpa's. During one of our strained family dinners, I mustered the courage to share my future plans. "I've been accepted to State University," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to study finance and business management." The ensuing silence was suffocating. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with James, and then cleared her throat. "Actually, Grace, I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone." Bewildered, I responded, "What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get a higher education. Mom shifted uncomfortably, then admitted, about that fund. James and I have been discussing it, and we think it would be better to save that money for Hannah's education. She's incredibly talented, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential. James added, nodding, Hannah has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do. Feeling as though I had been punched in the stomach, I realized that even the last gift my father had left for me was being redirected. My future, once supported by both of my parents, now seemed to hinge on the whims and preferences of a family I no longer recognized. That money is mine, I declared, my voice trembling with anger. Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just redirect it to Hannah. My mom's eyes brimmed with tears. Don't be selfish, Grace. Hannah is your sister, she pleaded. Stepsister, I corrected sharply, standing so quickly that my chair toppled over. And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've already given her everything. My room, your attention, your love. But you can't have this. I won't let you. How dare you? Mom cried out, tears now streaming down her face. Yet, I could see through the emotional facade of the manipulation beneath. After everything we've done for you, Hannah needs this. Hannah needs? What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me? The confrontation ended with doors slamming and tears, mostly from Mom, who lamented my selfishness to anyone who would listen. Following that explosive night, the apartment's atmosphere turned even colder. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Hannah would smirk smugly as she passed me in the hallway, and James avoided eye contact altogether. When my graduation day arrived, only Grandpa was there in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 5, and his proud, beaming smile was all the recognition I needed. That evening, I packed up my life into 3 cardboard boxes and an old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load everything into his car. Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart, he reassured me as we drove away from the apartment, a place that had ceased to feel like home long ago. I didn't look back.
College was my sanctuary.
I immersed myself in my studies, fueled by a desire to make both my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses were thrilling, and I excelled, always eager to share my achievements with Grandpa. Tell me again about derivatives, he'd request over the phone, his voice always eager and proud, even though he knew more about finance than most of my professors. But as the years went by, I noticed subtle changes in him. His voice grew tired more quickly, and his sharp wit sometimes faltered. On visits, I'd catch him wincing in pain or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. It's just age catching up with me, he'd dismiss, but my concern only deepened. I began calling him twice daily and drove home every weekend possible, not just on holidays. We'd spend hours in his kitchen, sipping tea and chatting about everything and nothing, just as we used to. Sometimes, he'd look at me with such profound love and pride that it tightened my throat. It was during my final semester when the call came, I almost didn't answer it. Grandpa died last night, Mom said, her voice emotionless. The news dropped like a stone in my stomach, and I collapsed, overcome with grief. The funeral was set for Thursday at 3 p.m. at the Hartford Funeral Home, a place as understated and dignified as Grandpa himself. I arrived early, dressed in black, feeling every fabric against my skin as a stark reminder of his absence. As I braced myself to face Mom and her new family, the weight of my loss bore down on me, and the emptiness was overwhelming. Grandpa wasn't there to see me through this, to offer a comforting word or a reassuring hug, and that realization was the hardest part of all. They weren't there when I arrived at the funeral. Instead, Mr. Thomas, one of Grandpa's old friends from his banking days, was managing everything. They're running a bit late, he informed me after I inquired about my mother's whereabouts. She called to say they'd be delayed. The service itself was a beautiful tribute to Grandpa, filled with heartfelt stories from those who knew him best, recollections of his kindness, integrity, and humor. Alone, I sat in the front row, engulfed by my grief, until the back door creaked open midway through the service. Mom entered, flanked by James and Hannah, all dressed in meticulously coordinated black outfits. They quietly took seats at the very back of the room. Mom didn't even look my way, her face a mask of solemnity that didn't quite reach her darting eyes, which seemed to be sizing up the room rather than mourning. I turned away, feeling a mix of grief and anger, tears stinging my eyes. Even here, at her father's funeral, she couldn't acknowledge me or set aside her grievances for just one day. After the service, I drove to what had been Grandpa's house and my home for the past 3 years. But the sight that greeted me stopped me cold. Garbage bags filled with my belongings were scattered across the front lawn as if they were trash. Some had burst open, spilling my clothes, books, and photo albums onto the grass. My hands shook as I tried my key in the front door, only to find that the locks had been changed. As I stood there, bewildered and key still in hand, the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, her funeral attire unchanged, but her expression now one of triumph. "Oh, good. You're here to collect your things," she said as if she were doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to comprehend the depth of her callousness. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral? These are my things, my home." "No, this is my home now," she interrupted sharply. "And you better take your stuff quickly, or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Hannah's things." Her smile was cold and dismissive. "She's getting your old room. She's always wanted a bigger bedroom." Numb. I began to gather my scattered belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags. I tried to collect the photos of Dad and Grandpa from the grass, while Mom watched from the doorway like a hawk, ensuring I took nothing else. The drive back to my college dorm was a haze of tears and disbelief. My roommate helped me carry everything upstairs, wisely choosing not to ask questions when she saw the state I was in. A week later, I received a phone call from a law firm. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Logan from Logan and Partners Law Firm. I'm your grandfather's notary. We need you to come in for the reading of his will. Would Thursday at 9 a.m. work for you?" I agreed, although I couldn't see the point. Mom had made it abundantly clear that she considered herself the heir to everything. When I arrived at the notary's office that Thursday, Mom, James, and Hannah were already there, settled into plush leather chairs like royalty. Hannah was absent-mindedly examining her manicure, while James scrolled through his phone. Mom's eyes narrowed as I entered, her gaze sharp and calculating. When she spotted me entering the room, my mother's face twisted with confusion and annoyance. "What are you doing here?" she demanded loudly, ensuring everyone in the office could hear. "You're clearly not needed for this. We're handling family business." Mr. Logan, the notary, adjusted his glasses and began to read from the document he had in front of him. "I, Ethan Levi Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament," he began in a formal tone. My mother already wore a smug, triumphant smile, but it quickly vanished as Mr. Logan continued. "To my beloved granddaughter, Grace Johnson, I leave my house, along with all its contents and my entire savings account, containing $650,000. The room fell into a stunned silence. My mother's disbelief shattered it moments later.
"What?"
"This can't be right," she exclaimed, snatching the document from Mr. Logan's hands, her eyes frantically searching the text. "Where's my part? I'm his daughter." Mr. Logan calmly retrieved the will from her grasp. "Mrs. Waters, your father's wishes are quite clear. He leaves everything to Miss Grace Johnson. There is no provision for you in the will." "This is impossible." My mother's face flushed a deep red. "She manipulated him. She poisoned him against me. I'll sue. I'll contest this will." "The will is ironclad," Mr. Logan stated firmly. "Your father had it properly witnessed and notarized 8 months ago. He was of completely sound mind, as attested by his doctor. Any attempt to contest it would be futile and expensive." Suddenly, my mother's strategy shifted from rage to sorrow as she turned her tear-filled eyes to me. "Grace, sweetie, please," she pleaded, her voice dripping with a false sweetness. "We've already given up our apartment. We moved everything out yesterday. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're family." I stood, holding the folder Mr. Logan had just handed me. Inside were the deed to the house, ownership transfer documents, and all the legal paperwork confirming my ownership of the property. "Family?" I asked quietly. "Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave. Like how you tried to steal my college fund. Like how you've treated me for the past 3 years." "That was different. She started, but I cut her off. "This is your problem, not mine." I turned to leave. "I suggest you start looking for a new apartment." I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now. Unable to get in, I called a locksmith. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. "I'm the legal owner of this house," I explained, asking him to open the locks and then change them. "I want to be the only one with the keys." As the locksmith worked, I packed up everything that belonged to Mom, James, and Hannah. Their clothes, toiletries, even the posters Hannah had already stuck to my old bedroom wall. I stuffed it all into garbage bags, just as they had done with my belongings. When the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I placed all their bags neatly on the front porch. As the sun began to set, I heard the familiar sound of my mother's car pulling into the driveway. From the living room window, Grandpa's favorite spot, I watched as they discovered their belongings outside, mirroring the treatment I had endured. My mother's outraged shriek, "What is this?" "All our things are outside," echoed, but this time I was prepared and resolute, watching the scene unfold with a sense of finality. I stood resolutely in the entryway as they approached, the scene charged with tension. My mother's face was a canvas of anger, James's expression soured as if he'd bitten into a bitter fruit, and Hannah's tears flowed freely, melodramatically punctuating the air. "How dare you?" My mother charged up the porch steps, her voice sharp. "We live here now. You can't just throw us out." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly, the ownership papers in hand. "This house legally belongs to me now. You'll need to collect your things and leave." "We have nowhere else to go," Hannah sobbed. "That was something to consider before you decided to leave your apartment," I responded without emotion. "It's not my responsibility." My mother tried to brush past me into the house, but I blocked her way. "Move, Grace. This is absurd. It's your father's house. It was his. Now it's mine. If you don't leave now with your belongings, I'll call the police for trespassing," I stated firmly, phone in hand, ready to dial. "The choice is yours, just as it was when you decided what to do with my belongings not so long ago," I reminded her of her recent actions. The air thickened with their curses and threats as they reluctantly packed their bags. Between her bouts of tears and fits of rage, my mother lamented the unfairness of it all, while Hannah repeatedly claimed I would regret my decision. James muttered about challenging the will as they stuffed their car with the last of their possessions. As they were about to leave, my mother turned sharply, her parting words stinging the cool air. "You're no daughter of mine. Your father would be ashamed." I mustered a sad smile.
"No, Mom.
Dad would be proud that I finally stood up for myself."
Goodbye."
I watched as their car faded into the distance, rounding the bend and out of my life. That was 8 months ago. Now, in my final semester, poised to graduate with honors, the house is leased to a delightful young family. Their rent is nurturing my savings, fulfilling my grandfather's wishes. I discovered his letter the night they all left, tucked away in the study safe. "My dearest Grace," it began, revealing his foresight into my mother's predictable reaction to his will. He apologized for the ordeal but expressed his confidence in my integrity and acumen. "The house is yours to manage as you see fit. Just one request, keep the family photos in the attic. Some memories, even the painful ones, are worth holding on to." I've honored his request, along with other promises I made to him and my father. Now I'm focused on forging ahead, embracing the future while retaining the lessons of the past. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about those who stand by you and nurture your growth. As for my mother, James, and Hannah, They eventually found a new place in the city. They've reached out a few times, typically in need, but I've chosen not to respond. Some chapters are better concluded, left firmly in the past as I build my future. In my perspective, there stood my parents, motionless, as if bracing themselves to offer an apology. "Thank you for traveling such a distance," my mother began, her gaze lowered in a blend of desperation and hope. "We've heard you might assist our struggling factory, and for that, we're profoundly thankful." My father added his piece, his eyes averted, sharing in the quiet plea for help. It was ironic that the factory they sought help for was the very place their daughter worked, the daughter they had left behind in the frigid mountains. "Let's focus on business matters. Please look at me," I encouraged. As they raised their heads, their expressions of shock upon hearing my familiar voice were almost comical, bringing a burst of laughter from me. "Now, how can I help you?" I introduced myself formally. "My name is Violet Wilson. I reside in a part of the city that's still rural, scattered with farms." Historically, my family operated a small smithy, crafting and fixing farm tools. Since my great-grandfather's era, we began manufacturing parts for agricultural machines and expanded the business considerably. Known as the Wilson Machinery under the leadership of my father, Liam, and my mother, Samantha, as the executive director, our family name carried weight here. I have an elder brother, Jackson, a prodigy cherished by our parents, fulfilling the community's expectations by attending a prestigious high school. As for me, I often felt overlooked in a society that favored sons over daughters. With expectations firmly set on Jackson to continue the family legacy, I was starkly reminded by my father, "A woman cannot inherit the family estate. Once you finish high school, that's it." These words, declared coldly when I was just in middle school, outlined a predetermined path for me, pushing me to focus solely on my academics, though setting such a goal was a heavy burden at that age. Jackson and I were so different it was hard to believe we were related. In school, he excelled academically, while I thrived in physical activities, racing across the fields like a wild deer. My athletic prowess was the one area where I could outshine my brother. However, the absence of academic talents made school challenging for me, and despite my best efforts, my grades barely improved. Witnessing my struggles, my parents scoffed, "You're nothing like Jackson. Do you not see your own limitations?" Their harsh words stung, yet fueled my determination. Then came a day when my midterm results were poor despite my hard work, leaving me devastated. My parents mocked me upon seeing my grades. "We should have known better. Investing further in you is pointless. You just don't have what Jackson does." As I endured their scolding, I silently prayed for the ordeal to end. Fortunately, Jackson stepped in to tutor me, his way of showing support, even if he wasn't one to express his emotions openly to our parents. Jackson was always a steady force in my life, a reassuring presence despite our parents' stringent attitudes. "It might be partly my fault our parents are so demanding, but remember, I'm always here for you," he reassured me. His words touched me deeply, and I found tears streaming down my cheeks. Bolstered by his support, I felt ready to take on any obstacle. As I progressed into my second year of middle school, Jackson passed the entrance exams for a prestigious university in the metropolitan area and moved away. His departure left his room empty and me alone, with the stark comparisons drawn by our parents. While Jackson naturally shone with his academic talents, I was left to carve my own path. I found solace and joy in running and joined the school's track team. My love for running deepened, and I set my sights on becoming a long-distance runner, hoping to secure a scholarship through athletics from a school renowned for its relay teams. Though Jackson excelled in his studies, he lacked athletic prowess, a domain where I felt I could finally outshine him. However, my parents seemed only interested in academic achievements, often overlooking my athletic successes. As Jackson approached his 19th birthday, Our parents planned an extravagant celebration. Get him an expensive watch. If you can't afford that, forget about going to university, my mother stated bluntly. Without the means to buy such a gift, I was left out as relatives gathered for a grand dinner in his honor. Jackson deserves this, because he excels. You, with your running obsession, would only dampen the spirits, my mother coldly remarked, leaving me to dine on instant noodles at home, alone with my tears and the steam rising from the bowl echoing my growing sense of isolation. During a summer break, Jackson, now working at a top firm and carrying the air of someone who'd matured rapidly, introduced me to the internet. This is an older model, but it's fast enough for browsing. It might even help with your studies, he said, handing me a laptop with a warm smile. He also gave me a beginner's guide to programming, encouraging me to explore this new field. This gift marked my entry into the world of information technology. Despite initially struggling with mathematical concepts, I found joy in creating programs. Each successful code I wrote brought a profound sense of achievement, and slowly, a new passion began to crystallize, though it was still forming its shape. One day, my father abruptly dismissed this budding dream. "Are you playing games on that computer again instead of studying?" he accused. "I'm programming, not playing," I responded, frustration coloring my tone. My words, hinting at his outdated views, only ignited his temper further. "What nonsense are you talking about, Violet?" he snapped, grabbing the laptop and throwing it out the window in a fit of anger. "Now that it's broken, maybe you'll focus on your studies." As I watched him walk away with a self-satisfied smirk, I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. I went outside to retrieve the laptop, only to find it shattered on the ground, its screen cracked, a stark symbol of my thwarted aspirations. Yet, even amidst the fragments of broken dreams, my resolve to forge my own path only grew stronger. The laptop was irreparably damaged. It wouldn't turn on anymore. Just when programming had begun to captivate me, offering a glimpse of a promising future, my brother's precious gift lay in pieces, its case cracked, completely useless. Without the funds for repairs, it seemed my newfound passion might fade away. As I stood amidst the remains of the broken laptop, despair washed over me. The device that symbolized my escape into a world of possibilities was now just a pile of debris. Unable to afford the repair costs, the prospect of continuing my programming journey looked bleak. However, while walking to school one day, burdened with heavy thoughts, a friend suggested a simple yet hopeful solution. "Why don't you use the school's desktop computers?" Inspired by this idea, I approached my teacher, who graciously allowed me access to the computer lab. This room soon became my sanctuary, where I could immerse myself in programming after school. As I dedicated more time to the school computers, even on weekends, a teacher noticed my dedication and offered extra support. My skills in programming sharpened steadily throughout high school. Then, during the summer of my sophomore year, my brother suggested I attend a summer course in Miami. I managed to fund the travel expenses with money from part-time jobs, staying in a dormitory of the company where my brother worked, and receiving extra tutoring in the evenings from him and his friend, Charles. Charles, quirky and unused to socializing with women due to his all-boys school background, became a unique presence that summer. My brother teased, "Don't worry, he's not bad, just a bit clueless around ladies." Our lighthearted banter and Charles's innocence added a special touch to those days, making my passion for programming soar. By the end of the summer, a new chapter of my life had begun. With the help of my brother and Charles, I had delved deep into the world of programming, thoroughly enchanted by its allure. Charles was different from my brother, polite and refined, his eccentricity never malicious, and I found myself unexpectedly charmed by him. As I entered the final summer of high school, reflecting on the earlier destruction of my computer, my brother brought home a surprise during his visit. He had spoken to Charles about my situation, and Charles, coming from a wealthy background, had offered a used laptop as a gift. "He's quite fond of you," my brother hinted with a mischievous chuckle, handing me the laptop. My face flushed with surprise and a bit of embarrassment as my brother playfully tapped my head. From then on, I received plenty of guidance from both my brother and Charles, and my programming skills significantly improved. "I never thought you'd take such an interest in programming," my brother remarked one day. "Yeah, it's fascinating," I replied. "Sometimes unexpected things happen, especially when there's a glitch in the calculations." This new journey with programming wasn't just about building skills. It was about discovering a passion that would define my future. Programming wasn't just a pastime for me. It was a passion. The thrill of solving a complex problem and seeing my programs run successfully brought me indescribable joy. Fueled by this enthusiasm, I made a bold decision to leave behind university life and pursue a career in a company located in the metropolitan area. With a new computer in hand, I was eager to carve out my future, continuously improving my programming skills and embracing each new challenge as part of my ongoing adventure. One chilly winter day, as I was preparing to embark on this new chapter, my parents unexpectedly suggested a family trip, something we hadn't done in years. Surprised by their sudden change of tone, I cautiously welcomed the idea. My brother was also returning home for the trip, and together we drove to a luxury hotel nestled in a snow-laden region. Throughout the drive and during our stay, my parents appeared unusually cheerful, mainly focusing their conversation on my brother's career and the challenges facing my father's business. The hotel offered a relaxing escape with its inviting pool and gourmet meals, but the warmth from my parents felt strangely forced. Late one night, as I got up to use the bathroom, I overheard them whispering in their room, "We can't keep spending on her. It's better if she stays behind this time. Yes, it's time for a thorough house cleaning." They were discussing cutting me off, essentially abandoning me. This revelation weighed heavily on my heart, but I resolved to accept my fate and move forward. The ride back was somber, with minimal conversation, likely due to the exhaustion from the trip. As we neared a parking area, my father mentioned he wanted a coffee. My brother suggested stopping there to buy some. As they sat in the car, I walked to the vending machines and selected a hot coffee for my father, tea for my mother, and a milk tea for myself. When I turned back towards the car, I saw my father pulling my suitcase out of the trunk. "Well, this is goodbye," he said abruptly. "It's too costly in time and fuel to drive you all the way to the station. You're like a dog, easily tamed with a little kindness." I was stunned. "Isn't the station still far from here?" I asked. His response was dismissive. "Do whatever you want. Run or walk. You were in the track team, after all. You need to make it on your own from now on. All right, the cleaning is complete. You were just clutter in the way." My brother remained silent throughout this harsh exchange, but gently placed my coat over the suitcase. As I stood in the snowy parking area, I watched their car vanish into the distance. Accepting this abrupt end to my familial ties felt like my only choice, a stark but freeing resolution to forge my path independently, powered by the resilience and determination that my years in track and programming had instilled in me. Standing alone in the snowy parking area, I sensed the beginning of a new chapter in my life. It was a moment of stark realization and transformation, marking the end of one phase and the exciting start of another. A decade later, I found myself driving back to my hometown, now thriving as a project leader at a cutting-edge tech company. My return was prompted by a professional engagement at the local factory, a place intertwined with both fond and painful memories. As I approached the familiar site, anticipation and old emotions stirred within me. "Violet," a familiar voice called out as I parked. Turning around, I saw my brother stepping out of a car, his face breaking into a wide smile. "I was worried you might get lost, given how much the area has changed." "No worries, the GPS got me here just fine," I replied, sharing a light moment before we dove into the reason for our reunion. "We've got a big project ahead, and the other party has high expectations. We need to be on top of our game," my brother briefed me as we walked towards the factory. I teased him with a grin. "Let's see if you can keep up with me. Don't underestimate a city-toughened sister." He laughed, clearly impressed. "You've grown strong." Indeed, it was this project that brought us back together. My brother had leveraged his experience from a major corporation to launch a startup focused on developing innovative mechanical solutions. His products were gaining traction and reviving our struggling hometown factory. As we entered the factory, a rush of cold air laced with nostalgia hit me. It was like stepping back in time, each corner holding echoes of my past. Then, as if on cue, I saw our parents waiting, their postures tense with anticipation of making amends. "Thank you for coming all this way," my mother said, her voice laden with remorse. "We're just glad to be able to help," my brother replied, trying to ease their formality. "No, we must show our true gratitude to our esteemed guests from Charles Industries," my father insisted, emphasizing their sincerity. At that moment, they finally noticed me. That voice, it sounds familiar," they murmured, their expressions puzzled. I couldn't help but chuckle as they slowly recognized me. "Yes, it's me, Violet. The one you left in the snowy mountains." Their astonishment was palpable. "Violet? How come you're here? We were told someone from Charles Industries would be coming." "Actually, I am now serving as a project leader at Charles Industries," I explained. Charles's father had become the president, and after the day I was abandoned, Charles, a friend of Jackson, had reached out to assist me. Jackson had anticipated the difficult times ahead and had taken steps to ensure I had a support system. This reunion was not just about confronting the past, but also about moving forward with new opportunities and reconciliations. It was a chance to redefine relationships and build on the new foundations I had established. Now, standing in the factory that once symbolized my exclusion, I was ready to lead a project that could possibly rejuvenate it, turning old wounds into sources of strength. Now, I've established myself significantly in the industry. In fact, I'm married and my spouse is a department head at Charles Industries. I was sent here under the president's directive to spearhead this factory's rejuvenation project. "Do you understand?" I explained as my parents and others listened intently. At that moment, memories of past betrayal surfaced. Before that day in the snowy mountains, my brother had handed me a note revealing our parents' intentions to abandon me during the trip. It read, "Our parents plan to use this trip to leave you behind. If anything happens, call this number." As predicted, when I found myself alone and stranded, I called the number, and Charles responded immediately. Embarrassed yet resolute, Charles confessed he had taken leave in advance, suspecting I might need help. "I'm really grateful you came to pick me up," I told him through tears. Charles, without a word, packed my luggage into his car, and we left that cold, unwelcoming place behind. The job I landed in Miami turned out to be with a subsidiary of the company managed by Charles's father. With the backing of my brother and Charles, I balanced work with studies, enrolling in a night university the following year. After graduation, I transitioned to the main company where Charles's father was in charge. There, I utilized my expertise to secure a position in construction management. Over time, as Charles moved up the ranks, I took on the role of project leader under his guidance. Working closely with Charles, my respect for him deepened into love. After his proposal, we got married. I continued to thrive professionally and took part in a major project that focused on reshoring production from overseas due to rising labor costs and currency issues, making overseas manufacturing less viable. During this time, I received unexpected news from my brother that our family's factory was in financial trouble. It had been undercutting prices to stay competitive, ultimately cornering itself financially. Considering these circumstances, my brother and I decided to revisit our family's factory. Upon arrival, as a representative of Charles Industries, my presence changed my parents' demeanor. They suddenly seemed hopeful. "Now that Violet is here, we can surely find a way through this crisis. It's natural for a daughter to help her family in times like these," they assumed. Facing them squarely, I had to set the record straight. "Perhaps you're misunderstanding the situation. I don't consider you my parents in the personal sense anymore. My involvement here will remain strictly professional." Shocked by my response, they retorted, "How can you be so cold? We didn't raise you to be this heartless." Calmly, I responded, "The state this factory is in is the result of poor management decisions on your part. Therefore, we'll be overhauling the management team with personnel from our headquarters. This means, effectively, the end of your management roles here." My father, red-faced and defiant, protested, "The factory will be sold, and that should cover the debts. I should be able to continue managing it, shouldn't I?" I shook my head, delivering the hard truth. I cannot trust you with the management of this factory anymore. As for the debts, the restructuring plan is made possible thanks to Jackson's efforts and the resources of Charles Industries. What happens next in your life is your own challenge to face. Good luck. This marked a pivotal moment, not just in the history of the factory, but in my personal narrative, as I closed the chapter on my old family ties and moved forward with renewed determination. As my brother and I walked away from the confrontation with our parents, they slumped down, defeated. Well, that finally settles it, I said, but I quickly corrected myself. It's not the end, though. It's actually just the beginning. This place is going to transform into a hub for domestic production. Yeah, with the production management system you developed and my new machine tools, we have a high chance of becoming the best in the whole country, my brother responded with enthusiasm.
What?
No, we're not just aiming to be the best in the country. We're aiming to be the best in the world, I declared. Sharing such lofty aspirations, my brother laughed heartily, echoing the ambition that now defined us. As expected, our parents eventually sold the factory, but the amount they received wasn't enough to cover their debts. I heard they ended up working in a very cold location, and although they have begged us for money multiple times, we've deliberately chosen not to respond. However, I couldn't completely ignore their plight, so as an ironic gesture, recalling how they left me out in the cold, I sent them a box of disposable hand warmers I had collected during my college days. Meanwhile, the factory we purchased was revitalized and is now thriving after renovations. It has become a central hub for manufacturing, inventory management, and shipping, providing new jobs for the local community and gaining significant appreciation. Alongside my husband, I'm leading new projects to expand our division. In the future, we plan to focus on supporting American companies in their overseas market expansions and business partnerships. Our lives are busy, but a few times a year, we take time to rest at that distant hotel, especially when it starts to snow. Each year, visiting that spot stirs something in my heart.
What are you thinking about?
Reflecting on the past again, my husband asked gently during one of our visits. Yes, this place holds unforgettable memories that linger in my heart, I responded. Me too, it all started here, he said with a smile. I remember that day. Despite it being the middle of winter, your face was beet red like a boiled octopus, I said, trying to hold back my laughter. Haha, you too, your face was so red, you looked like a child, he retorted. We looked at each other and burst into laughter together. Thank you, I love you, I said, filled with emotion. No, thank you. Life is like a book composed of many stories. Episodes between a couple like us form a chapter of that story, and it's quite captivating, he replied, squeezing my hand as we both cherished the journey that began in that snowy parking area, a journey that transformed our lives forever.